0 divergence, point, rootage. In the darkness, I sank deep into the bucket seat and turned the key with a light flick of the wrist. A faint vibration settled into my back. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a cigarette. I raked my right hand through my hair. The wet strands were clinging to my scalp, and the cold droplets running down my neck were more than a little irritating. I squeezed the electronic lighter, and a point of orange light pulsed in the dark. Outside, the rain hammered against the bodywork in relentless waves, heavy drops, the kind that meant business. My car is an old replica of a classic sports car, the kind that absolutely needs to warm up before you push it. A typhoon was bearing down on us, and the university had issued an evacuation order earlier in the day. Thunder. There was still work left on the table, but an order is an order in all but name. No point pretending otherwise. The wipers swept across the windshield. No sooner had they cleared the glass than fresh rain filled it again. It reminded me, with irritating precision, of how my research was going. I exhaled a sigh of boredom into the purple smoke and watched it drift out through the cracked window. I can't enjoy this work. I know that now. The frustration has nowhere to go. It just pools somewhere inside my chest and sits there. The research is behind schedule. Not a little behind, completely behind. Behind in a way that offends me personally. Mechanical augmentation and expansion of cerebral processing capacity. That's the official title of my research. Put plainly, establishing a technology for creating backup data in the event of brain damage, and developing the means to mechanically supplement a living human brain. And I was staring down 3 very large problems. The first, before I could even think about expanding the brain's processing capacity, I needed to fully map the human brain. To understand, completely and without gaps, how information is transmitted and managed within it. Emotions, thoughts, instincts. At the end of the day, they're nothing more than electrical signals firing inside a lump of tissue. And if they're electrical signals, then all of that data can be stored, copied, replayed, and transferred. Which means that completing a full 3-dimensional map of the brain, tracing every chemical synapse, electrical synapse, and mixed synapse, was an absolute prerequisite for this research to go anywhere. We've made some progress, but nowhere near the level my work demands. To perfectly reconstruct a person's will, there can be no margin of error, not even a single electron's worth. If I could achieve a truly complete analysis, I could capture a human being's memory and consciousness at any given moment, preserve it in full. Which means, in a very real sense, that I would have succeeded in making a person persist beyond their biological limits. Not the body, but the person. The second problem. Even if I managed to collect all that data flawlessly, that alone wouldn't be enough. Preserving an individual's memories and personality means nothing if there's no way to run them. What's the point of a single person's entire inner world sleeping inside a storage device too massive to move? What I want is an artificial human at human scale. Or a modified human with a supplementary conductive brain sealed inside the skull alongside the original. That means building a compact CPU capable of serving as the receiving vessel. To process the sheer volume of information generated inside an artificial brain, you need an enormous number of transistors. But development of transistors in the single nanometer range, already approaching the quantum mechanical limit, was within reach. Borrow that technology, and a supplementary conductive brain capable of housing a recorded personality wasn't far off. If, hypothetically, the vessel required even higher fidelity than what we could manufacture. Then we'd need a blank biological brain, one without any memories loaded into it. That's how far along the supplementary conductive brain technology already was. Which is why I was absolutely certain, when this research succeeds, it will rewrite human history. But, infuriatingly, the research was not going well. The third problem, money. Several experiments have already demonstrated that the theory is reproducible. I have multiple test subjects lined up, myself included. The surgeries have been completed. And the observation devices installed inside each subject's skull are generating data daily, accumulating steadily. Give me 100 billion yen, and I'll change the world. I had assumed the brain, 2 fistfuls of tissue, would only handle a finite amount of information, and that analyzing it wouldn't be especially difficult. That assumption was shattered with almost insulting ease. The changes in the brain's electrical signals were effectively limitless. Short-term memory, long-term memory, animal instinct, emotional state, and beyond all that, human beings actively deceive themselves. The brain's memory capacity, previously estimated at around 1 petabyte per person, turned out to be intricately layered and folded in on itself. Observing it was less like examining a piece of hardware and more like staring into the abyss of the ocean, or charting the deep cosmos. No personal computer was going to handle this. A supercomputer was non-negotiable. In practice, I was already occupying nearly the entire university supercomputer to run my analysis, and it still wasn't keeping up. On top of that, there was a constant tug-of-war between departments over supercomputer time. Getting more than my current allocation was politically all but impossible. I'd been having my professor lean on the university president for leverage, but the outcome was anyone's guess. At this pace, a complete analysis and preservation of a single person's memory data, to say nothing of playback, would take a decade or more. Something else is needed, a different approach. I'm getting genuinely angry now. Give me the funding and I'll change the world. I've been saying that, and still nobody listens. I drew a long breath from the cigarette and let the smoke unwind from my lips. There are so many fools in this world, incompetents who can't recognize what should take priority. People who actively obstruct me without even realizing it. Nothing is more maddening. I'm going to make every last one of you regret it. I conducted a small private massacre of irritating professors inside my head. Unhealthy? Certainly, I was aware. But I let it run its course anyway. The rain kept on. The orange ember at the tip of the cigarette. The slow exhale. Maybe I should drag my friend out this weekend, blow off some steam. Fortunately, her workplace was nearby. She was a teacher at the academy affiliated with the university. If I'd become a teacher too, standing in front of students, delivering passable lessons, and spending the quiet hours on my own research. In terms of pure progress, maybe that kind of frictionless existence would have served the work better than this. I have no doubts about my own talent, no doubts that I can succeed. The problem was that my talent sprawled in too many directions at once. Physics, mathematics, philosophy, medicine, whatever caught my interest, I understood it completely. I sat in on every lecture that held any appeal, snuck into courses at other universities as an auditor. Absorbed everything without effort. I understood faster than others. I reproduced it faster. I moved forward faster. That was precisely why choosing a path had been so hard. In one sense, my life as a researcher is fulfilling. In another sense, it borders on a kind of emptiness. My friend, who became a teacher by comparison, seems genuinely content. I could see it, watching from the outside. Students clearly liked her. I'd spotted her laughing with them more than once. If I could be there with her? No, absolutely not. I'd completely slack off. A self-deprecating smile crossed my lips. We get along too well, the two of us. I have a tendency to lean on her. She's the easygoing type, but there's a core to her that doesn't bend. In a comfortable, lukewarm environment, I knew exactly how lazy I would become. In the end, I never actually work unless I'm cornered. It was mortifying to admit about myself, but I knew my own nature better than anyone. Without difficulty, without a genuine problem pressing against me, my real drive simply doesn't ignite. And yet, strip away the comfort, remove the excuse to coast, and there was nothing I couldn't do. If any path would lead me to success, then it hardly mattered which one I chose. In that case, why not take on the intellectual challenge of solving problems no human being has ever solved? Why not pick the most troublesome, most vexing route available? That was how I ended up staying at the university, continuing the research. I judged the engine's stability by the feel against my back, then crushed my cigarette in my portable ashtray. I knew it was bad for my health, but at this moment, I needed the habit of smoking. When I turned on the lights, white, thread-like raindrops appeared in the darkness of the night. If I used the quad light pods I have installed on my car, it would look even brighter. But I can't use them in the city because it's illegal. I pressed the clutch and put the car into first gear. I lightly revved the engine and released the parking brake. At that moment, something jumped into my field of vision, which was framed by the headlights. A girl in an unfamiliar white dress, and a small one. Her rain-soaked hair clung tightly to her forehead. I gasped. As a scientist, I don't believe in ghosts or spirits. Of course, I don't have enough evidence to disprove their existence. But I'm more convinced that the brain is an organ prone to malfunctions. I stopped moving for about 2 seconds and shook my head. It seemed she was real. A hallucination couldn't last this long. So I turned the window regulator and opened the window. I stuck half of my tilted head out and called out, "What are you doing here?" The girl's body flinched. Perhaps she hadn't even noticed that the car's headlights were shining on her. I observed the girl again. She was thin and looked very tired. She looked like she was around elementary school age. She was definitely not a university student. And she was wearing clothes I'd never seen before. They looked like traditional Japanese clothing, but not something I recognized. My guard was up, but my curiosity won out. "Can you hear me? This is the university grounds." The girl slowly looked at me. She was pretty, even though she was drenched. She exuded a dignified elegance. The girl noticed me. Our gazes met. Her expression was strangely mature. "I apologize for asking such an unrelated question, but is this Hakuryō University?" The girl's voice was faint and anxious, but there was a noble aura beneath her husky voice. "Yes, this is Hakuryō University. Are you a family member? Of a faculty member?" The girl was silent for a while, but then replied that she was not family. Then what was her purpose in being alone on a stormy night? "I'm looking for someone," the girl said before I could ask. "Do you happen to know a woman named Kozuki Yuko?" I stopped moving at the sudden mention of my own name. I observed the girl again. Her skin was as pale as a corpse's. Her rain-soaked hair was plastered to her forehead, and finally noticed that she was carrying luggage in both hands. "What do you intend to do when you meet her?" I had a premonition. "There is something I must tell her. I apologize for asking, but if you know where she is, could you tell me?" "That depends on what it is," I replied to the girl. I became aware of my own heartbeat. Something was happening. "I'm sorry, but I can't reveal the details. It's top secret." "Top secret, you say? Tell me, and I'll decide after that." The girl seemed a little annoyed. "This is too funny." "I'm Kuzuki Yuko. What business do you have with this genius?" The girl looked bewildered at the revelation. Satisfied with her expression, I smiled. Looking back, it all began here. That day marked the start of that hellish battle. My battle, and the battle for the survival of humanity, began at this very moment. 01, the real world, where memories begin. Shirasawa, Naoto, 2001. The strange monuments that appeared overnight across the world left humanity dumbstruck. Every instrument of human knowledge was brought to bear on the colossal structures, and every attempt to breach even their outer walls ended in failure, not a single result to show for it. 2010, from the monument at Kashgar. A swarm of aberrant lifeforms erupted and overran the encircling military forces in minutes. Ground armor was crushed without mercy. Not one aircraft survived. Humanity, reeling, threw itself into the development of new weapons to meet what it could no longer ignore. 2015. The water resources that should have flowed from the Himalayan ranges dried up. China, India, and the nations of Southeast Asia were devastated, bound in their homes and scattered in every direction. Neighboring countries buckled under the weight of the refugees, and the same tragedy began to unfold across Europe. 2016. The aberrant life forms, by now confirmed to be spreading their territory across the Earth, were also observed on the lunar surface. Hostile to humanity, extraterrestrial in origin, the things began to be called Beto. And their advance did not stop. The new weapons deployed against them performed better than anything that had come before. It wasn't enough. Humanity was forced to retreat from the Eurasian continent entirely. A global population that had once numbered 70 billion had been reduced to 50 billions. 2023 Japan, with beta hive presences at Sato Island, Yokohama, and Kokura, had seen its population fall to 70 millions. What I'm about to tell you is something I heard later. Approximately 3.9 billion years ago, life born in the oceans began to prey upon others, or flee from those who preyed upon it, in order to survive. As that cycle of selection played out across countless generations, those organisms developed a desire to perceive light. And that desire eventually shaped their flesh into something new, the eye spot, a rudimentary organ of vision. The information that flowed into living things through sight stimulated their nervous systems in ways nothing had before. Over time, that stimulation gave rise to species with activated, complex brains. Among the countless forms life took as it diversified, some moved their territory from the sea to the land. Our own ancestors, it said, were among them. The desire to know holds the power to transform the very shape of a living creature. Eyes, ears, nose, all of it developed to perceive the world outside and, through that, to perceive the self within. So I suppose it was only natural that I wanted to know the world. And I think it must have been equally natural that, by learning the world outside myself, something inside me began to grow. July 11th, 2023. A sound far away. Metal grinding against metal, or something heavy falling again and again onto solid ground. A dull, muffled percussion. A faint tremor. The sensation of something warm tracing the surface of my skin, like drifting in the ocean. A voice. Someone calling my name, maybe. Then suddenly, a stab of pain, sharp and without warning. Wake up, administrator. The impact hit like a kick to the brainstem. A woman's voice, sharp with irritation. Close. My eyes snapped open on reflex, and I realized I was floating. No, I was leaning back in a seat. My skin told me. But the view was wrong. I was off the ground, elevated. I seemed to be positioned at the height of the 3rd or 4th floor of a building, looking out over the world from there. Buildings lined both sides of a main road. A bank, a large cafe, a mixed-use office block. No question about it. This was the main street of a major city. But something was wrong. Fires burned in several places simultaneously. Some buildings had windows blown out, vomiting black smoke. The outer walls of others were cracked and fractured. Utility poles snapped and leaning. An abandoned line of vehicles left where they had stopped, midday, and not a single person visible. A detonation. The building diagonally ahead and to the left exploded. A spray of massive concrete fragments, a billowing wall of dust and debris. Something enormous stepped through the cloud. What? The sound came out of me before I could stop it. Aberrant. A body of grotesque, wrongful flesh. Something I had never seen before. Something that had no business existing on this planet. It looked like an enormous flesh-colored scorpion, or perhaps a crab. Massively, impossibly built. The muscles that packed its frame strained and creaked with their own weight. Where a scorpion would have hard carapace, this creature's body was largely unarmored. Standing roughly 3 floors tall. The section corresponding to a scorpion's tail appeared to be fashioned, hideously, in the rough shape of a human face. Like something from a horror film. The moment I thought it, something shifted inside my skull. Large category, extraterrestrial organism. Assault class, grappler type. Common designation, medium. A voice I didn't recognize was continuing the explanation, somewhere inside my head. 60% of all beta were multi-limbed walkers, primary armament, 2 pairs of powerful forearms. The same forearms that had just demonstrated their capability by collapsing the building in front of me. The knowledge arrived like it had been branded there, arriving fully formed from nowhere. Something was very wrong. I didn't know how I knew. But I understood somehow that I was participating in a war against these creatures. Humanity's hostile extraterrestrial adversaries. The phrase was seared into my mind. We are fighting a war for the survival of our species. Therefore, fight. A spike of pain through my skull. The information arranging itself inside my head sorted automatically. Urban combat. Most civilians already evacuated, but some will still be trapped. Can't let them be caught by these things while trying to escape. That's at least part of why I'm here. My thoughts lurched and arrived somewhere, and in that moment, a massive shadow shifted, and the whole world swung. Cold washed through my entire body. The sensation of falling. The crunch of metal on metal, a massive impact. We took a hit. A woman's voice, raw and furious, coming from less than half a meter in front of me. Damage to the frame. Chest armor is warping. Below and ahead, a woman, hair tied high, the back of her head visible, rendered in translucent outline like a half-formed ghost. Translucent. The ghost of a woman. I caught my breath instinctively, but the thought was drowned immediately under a torrent of very living profanity. Correcting, cover me. Not a ghost, but whatever she was. The cold hit my gut again, a lurching sensation of backward movement. Distance from the assault class grappler opening up, retreating. The translucent woman was piloting something, working controls I couldn't see. Was I riding along with her? I couldn't tell what was real? Why? Shouldn't I ask the woman in front of me what's happening? But what if that breaks her concentration? What do I even do? And why did a human being look translucent in the first place? I brought my hand to my face and found I was wearing something. A headset of some kind. When my fingers found my forehead, pain answered back. I'm bleeding. Sword dancer to Dawn Purple, fall in behind me. The headset crackled, a radio signal. Acknowledged. The translucent woman in the forward seat responded. The forward pilot was apparently call sign, Dawn Purple. Don't let it close, extraterrestrial contact. Our dancer's voice. Also a woman. Something slid between us and the grappler, and I went still again. It was enormous, a figure like a towering divine statue. I couldn't breathe. Steel blue armor, a long blade, 10 meters at least, like an armored samurai, like a knight. A giant humanoid weapon. Something like this actually exists. Something shifted inside my skull, again. Tactical surface fighter. The Imperial Japanese military's primary TSF. A schematic surfaced in my mind without being asked for. Output, operational flexibility. I knew this machine. I knew it with certainty. Humanoid weapons were built to fight Beta. Against humans, this shape would be meaningless. TSS were weapons built to plunge into the Beta's hives and tear them apart from the inside. A skewer of pain through the top of my skull. The sound of displaced air. The Shiranui that had placed itself between us and the grappler swept its blade, and a fan of dark red fluid sprayed outward, in torrent, like a fire hose, painting the face of the high-rise building in glistening crimson. I know that's Beta blood. I know that. How do I know that? How do I know any of? I'll hold here. The voice rang clear and composed, the voice of a warrior, the pilot of the Shiranui. I looked, and through the Shiranui I could make out 3, maybe 4 more grappler-class Beta pressing forward. The woman, presumably sword dancer, had brought her long blade to center guard and was standing her ground. Are you all right, Administrator? I'm sorry, I couldn't fully dodge it. Close. The translucent shape in front of me had turned around and was looking directly at me. What's wrong? Did you hit your head? You're bleeding? She said it and I remembered. Yes, I was injured. Take off the headset. There should be a spare under the seat, and something to press against that wound. Dawn Purple sounded faintly frantic. I'm sorry. If only you hadn't reached for that portable ration when you did, you wouldn't have been injured. This is my fault. I'll make it up to you. For now, the yokin you're still holding in your teeth. Please, eat that. It's from Mokoya. It's exceptional. Dawn Purple muttered it with genuine regret in her voice. Reality and unreality. The line between them had ceased to mean anything. Apparently, I had been in the process of eating a yokin while riding a giant humanoid weapon into battle against alien monsters. This is not the time to be eating anything. I pulled off the headset to assess the wound, and the world went dark. Leads on, electronics cast faint light. I was in a small enclosed space. Dawn Purple's hand found my forehead. She pressed a cleaning cloth into my hand, and I held it against the cut. The slick warmth told me more about the wound than I wanted to know. And at the same moment, the warmth of her hand told me she was real. Head wounds bleed dramatically. Someone had told me that once. Dawn Purple reached over to fit the spare headset onto me. She was close. Close enough that I felt unexpectedly self-conscious. The new headset activated with a soft electronic tone, and the outside world came flooding back. Information being projected directly onto the retina, perhaps? A tablet-shaped frame materialized in the air before me, and a face I didn't recognize appeared inside it. Another woman's. Dark hair, features that struck me as composed and refined, somewhere around high school age. The word that came to mind was immaculate. 20 was probably too old. She was still on the boundary between girl and young woman. One lock of hair was tied back with a decorative cord. That detail stuck with me. White Fang to Dawn Purple. Are both of you in one piece? White Fang. Black hair, white name. Her expression was taut. I'm fine, but the administrator took a wound to the head, stanching it now. Is the administrator conscious? White Fang's expression darkened. Well, she has a sort of blank look on her face, and she's holding a yokin between her teeth. Get it together, administrator. You always do this at the worst possible moment. I answered before I could stop myself. Yes, I'm sorry. Administrator. Presumably that meant me. What kind of job was that exactly? The title sounded vaguely important, as titles went. And then, in the middle of that thought, I realized I couldn't remember my own name. What is this? Myself, who am I? For that matter, was I even male, female? I want to be clear, I do rate your judgment. But what is this curse you carry? Why is it that you only cause problems at the most critical moments? The accusation felt slightly unfair, but watching White Fang flush pink with genuine, earnest fury, I found her oddly endearing. On reflex, I reached down to check. The lower half of my body was encased in hard structural components. I couldn't make contact with anything definitive. I assessed my chest instead, flat enough to leave the question open, but not that flat. I'd operate on that assumption for now. White Fang, we'll manage on this end. Cover us while we do. Fine. A long exhale, somewhere between surrender and exasperation, and White Fang's window blinked out. A short tone. A new tablet frame expanded in my field of vision. Topographic data of the surrounding area. 4 yellow markers, friendly units, being slowly encircled by a vast constellation of hostile red. Sword Dancer and White Fang were moving to intercept the closing red markers. A separate contact was swinging around behind our position, practiced movement, deliberate. A hand touched the wound at my head, long fingers, careful. Keep pressure on it, administrator. I'm sorry, the word administrator. What does that mean? I offered the question carefully, tentatively. I beg your pardon? A beat. I mean, I understand you're probably referring to me. I just don't know what it means. Or anything after that, either. Someone please explain. Give me a moment. Dawn Purple, still translucent, turned toward me with a serious expression. One more thing, I added. Why are you translucent? A legitimate follow-up. White Fang in the communication window hadn't been translucent. And Dawn Purple had been able to touch my wound, so she wasn't a ghost. Translucent. The combat control unit doesn't normally project the pilot image inside. Wait, you genuinely don't remember anything? I nodded. Is this you making a little joke to lighten the mood at a tense moment? I shook my head. Oh no. Dawn Purple made an unusual noise. While I'm at it, I should also mention that I can't remember my own name. Amnesia. We're not in a 1970s television drama. I didn't know the reference, but there was no point in evasion. Why are you like this? Even a 1990s hard drive doesn't just lose data that easily. I'm sorry, it wasn't on purpose. I know that, it's just... She stopped. The words caught in her throat. A strange silence settled over us, interrupted by a small, precise electronic tone. Incoming cluster of tank class. Sword Dancer's voice. Tank class, medium beta, common designation, Equispedis. Dark reddish body mass, a powerful set of mandibles at the center of the torso, capable of shearing through TSF-grade armor. The profile I'd somehow filed away for tank class beta was wiped out by the sound of someone clicking their tongue. Dawn Purple 2 all units. Act on individual judgment until further notice. The administrator has sustained a head wound and is disoriented from concussion. She's conscious, but she doesn't know who she is. That's exactly why I said I didn't want to be under this idiot's command. A voice I didn't recognize. Not White Fang, not Sword Dancer. A new communication window had opened. Silver hair, pale skin? Her expression made the extent of her goodwill toward me very clear. And I couldn't remember who she was either. I was beginning to grasp the true shape of my memory's damage. General knowledge, intact. I could read the buildings and signs around me well enough to understand I was in Japan. I could recognize that silver hair was unusual. I could recall full combat data on beta species classifications and TSF specifications. What was missing was everything immediately around me. The people here and myself. Like something had taken a core sample out of my memory and left a clean, round hole. 4 female pilots. I manage them. That's why I'm called administrator. A guess from context. Accuracy unknown. Settle down, Snow White. Screaming changes nothing. Sword Dancer's communication window opened. She carried the same quality of presence as White Fang, I thought. Something composed and martial, hair pinned high, a bearing that spoke of discipline. The elegance of it sharpened her beauty. Are you kidding me? How am I supposed to be calm? This brain-dead idiot is holding our lives in her hands. Snow White. That was the silver-haired woman's name, apparently. Her shout landed somewhere in my chest. The weight of what administrator meant was becoming clearer than I'd hoped. Compose yourself, Snow White. For now, our task is to fight and buy time. A third communication window opened. White Fang again, this time alongside the others. Dawn Purple, please brief the administrator on the situation. If the confusion is temporary, this needn't become a serious problem. We'll provide cover for as long as we can. and I stood. Dawn Purple acknowledged, and the windows dropped away, one by one. They had gone back to fighting, and I needed to be brought up to speed. By the woman in the forward seat, whose translucent outline was now slowly, gently gaining color as she adjusted something on the headset she'd fitted me with. She fixed the calibration, in the middle of all this. That surprised me a little. My guess, during active combat, visual data from the control unit was suppressed to prioritize the external feed. Now that I could see her clearly, her features were well defined. She reminded me strongly of Sword Dancer. Perhaps a shade warmer in the tone of her hair. Siblings, maybe. My name is Chijira Sayoi. Call me whatever you like, but on the battlefield my call sign is Dawn Purple. Dawn Purple, the purple of early dawn, or perhaps the color of the world as a newborn first sees it. As you can see, this is a battlefield. An undeniable reality. The wound at my temple gave a slow throb. We pilot tactical surface fighters and tear apart beta. We are called Aishi. Aishi, TSF pilots. The knowledge inside me updated itself accordingly. And our enemy is what's known as extraterrestrial organisms. Not particularly cute, as you may have noticed. Something clicked into place. Beings of extraterrestrial origin and adversaries of the human race. Beta. The information that had been surfacing in my head wasn't delusion. It was memory. As the name says, our enemy was born on another world entirely. Invaders from space. This is like something out of a science fiction film. I heard myself say it, trying to frame the unacceptable as fiction. Escapism. I knew that's what it was. And I understood, with equal clarity, that escape was not something I could afford. 02, the real world, first mission. Shirasawa Naoto, the woman who had introduced herself as Chijira Sayoi, kept talking. The beta's advance into the Kanto region was ongoing. Our unit belonged to a private military company called the Immortals. Civilian evacuation had been underway for some time, but large numbers of people were still trapped. We were fighting to support their escape. 3 others were operating alongside us. Sword Dancer, Mitsurugi Meiya, White Fang, Takamura Yui, Snow White, Akatoki Mashiro. Mitsurugi and Takamura, both carrying themselves with something close to the bearing of classical warriors, held the vanguard. Akatoki, pale as her name suggested, and Chijira in the forward seat covered the rear. Mitsurugi, Akatoki, and Chijira were piloting Shiranui TSFs. Takamura alone flew something different, a Takama Kadzuchi in deep amber gold. I listened as Chijira walked me through the differences in loadout by position, the techniques each of them specialized in. Her explanation wasn't polished, but it felt honest. Sword Dancer is exceptional with a blade, sharp as a samurai, but she doesn't talk about herself. She's probably just shy. Mitsurugi with her hair pinned high. She wasn't pushing anyone away. But there was something about her, that particular quality certain people carry. That made it clear you wouldn't get close to her easily. Snow White gets angry a lot. She's probably just hungry. White as her namesake, her skin almost porcelain. Visibly biting down on her irritation, the way a professional soldier is trained to do. White Fang is a good person, the type who'd be handed the class representative role and handle it without complaint. But she's not stiff about it. Long black hair, one lock bound with a decorative cord. When Snow White had come at me, she'd stepped in to mediate. That alone said something about her. Of the 3, All four, counting Shijira herself. She felt like the one I could most easily call a friend. That's the situation. Does it make sense to you, Administrator? My honest reaction. The fact that I was working for a private military company surprised me. But looking at the beta remains strewn around us, accepting that this was wartime wasn't difficult. Even if someone had told me the floor of hell had split open and the dead were running loose on the surface, I would have believed Shijira. Nothing is more persuasive than what's directly in front of you. So, you still can't remember anything in the way of tactics? No, I'm sorry. I have some general sense of beta and TSFs, but beyond that. Through the conversation, I'd come to accept that I was the unit's commanding officer. The one sitting in the rear seat of a two-seater aircraft, overseeing operations from the field. But the specific knowledge that role required, none of it was coming back. In that case, command authority will need to be transferred to the next ranking member. You understand? Of course, right now nothing but dead weight. If my memory comes back later, perhaps I can return to the administrator's role then. Understood. We'll proceed that way. Chijira seemed satisfied with that. I couldn't remember the exact procedures for transferring command authority, but that was something I could safely leave to them. All I could do was hope the memories returned quickly. Which reminded me of something important. I'm sorry, what is my name, actually? I can't remember. Chijira Sayoi looked directly into my eyes. The sensation of being seen all the way through. What is it? The proximity translated immediately into embarrassment. I looked away. Well, your name is... Her breath was close enough to feel. Sorry, I forgot. Silence. I mean, I do remember that your call sign is Puppet Master, but your actual name... It just slipped my mind. You cannot be serious. We were sharing a cockpit and she'd forgotten my name. Before I could process that properly, a communication window opened with a chime. Snow White. So how did that go? Got all your memories back. It'd honestly be easier if you just died. Either way, I wouldn't have to explain anything. Snow White, Akatoki Mashiro, clearly had no particular fondness for me. She came in sideways every chance she got. Had we fought at some point? That seemed like the most likely explanation. Bleeding has stopped, assessing consciousness level as normal. Why is that a question? Sword dancer, Mitsurugi Meiya. She still can't remember her own name, so... Then transferring command authority is unavoidable. As Mitsurugi said it, Chijira glanced downward, and in that moment, a suspicion surfaced. She's waiting for someone else to say the name. I studied her carefully maintained look of solemn composure. Understood. In accordance with protocol, please transfer command authority. Sword dancer, you're next in seniority. I'm placing the unit in your hands. White Fang, Takamura Yu, made the declaration. No objections here. Beats taking orders from someone who doesn't know which way is up. Akaki's endorsement delivered with characteristic bite. And from this point, I'll take command of the platoon. Sword dancer answered, then murmured something under her breath about needing to file an upward report. 3 minutes later, a tactical display of the entire Kanto theater floated in the air before us. A concentration of heavy laser class beta has just been confirmed deploying around Mount Akagi. Alongside the theater window, a communications window displayed a woman of mature bearing, a command post officer from the looks of it. She introduced herself as Chinguji Marimo. As a result, the majority of the Kanto region now falls within heavy laser irradiation range. Western Tokyo is completely inside the laser envelope. A voice, not quite caught by the mic, dripping with profanity. The phrasing pointed to Akitoki Mashiro. Chijira, Mitsurugi, and Takamura had all gone quiet. I understood both impulses. The urge to curse and the choice to say nothing. The display updated. A two-legged silhouette appeared. Heavy laser class, common designation, Magnus Lux. Something clicked into place in my mind. The shape of it was almost absurd, like a massive eyeball that had simply sprouted legs directly from its base. At over 20 meters tall, the biological laser it fired was estimated to have a range in excess of 1,000 kilometers. Against targets flying at 500 meters altitude, effective range extended to over 100 kilometers. And the mountains around Nanakagi ran above 1,500 meters in elevation. From that high ground, overlooking the Kanto Plain, even the capital's metropolitan area came within reach. The National Defense Force is continuing active engagement. However, the Japanese government has formally resolved to abandon the Kanto Plain in its entirety. All government functions will transfer to the provisional capital, Sendai. Cabinet resolution on a capital relocation. Japan would lose the Kanto region's agricultural and industrial capacity completely. What waited on the other side of that was probably a slow, grinding decline. Even I, with no memory to draw on, could follow that logic easily enough. We will continue combat operations to buy time for civilian stragglers. Civilian stragglers. An unfamiliar phrasing. Chijira must have caught my murmur. We were sharing the same cockpit, after all. Because she leaned in just below the volume of the briefing. Evacuation orders went out ages ago, but not everyone left. People who had known the order was there, known it was illegal to stay, and stayed anyway. I couldn't quite articulate why, but something about that made sense to me. Coordinates are being transmitted via data link. First priority is linking up with friendly forces. Sword dancer. Sorry to burden you, but the command is yours. Engage and destroy any beta contact. On. Jinguji added that before cutting the channel. The friendlies we're linking with are National Defense Capital Defense Forces. Right, great, just great. Akata Kogi wore the expression of someone deeply unimpressed. Something about the National Defense Force clearly did not sit well with her. Excuse me, what is the National Defense Force? The characters told me something, but on a battlefield, a wrong assumption can become a serious problem. I asked Chijira, knowing full well I was testing her patience. In the window, Akitoki's expression shifted to something approaching despair. You don't even know that. It's this country's military. Technically, it only performs national defense, no offensive operations. And apparently that means it isn't classified as a military. Chijira answered faithfully, but I couldn't quite piece it together. An organization that defends the country, but isn't a military? Armed police force, Coast Guard. The words surfaced from somewhere. Yes, honestly, I don't fully understand it either. Someone once explained it to me as grown-up politics. Vague to the point of being almost useless, entrusting the defense of the capital to a military that wasn't a military. What exactly did that mean in practice? Whenever things get too complicated to explain, adults say it's grown-up politics. I think that's a little dishonest. I agreed with Chijira completely, Adults dress reality up in clever language to make it more palatable, even when they know, somewhere, that it changes nothing. 03. The Real World. First Mission. Shirasawa Naoto shouting and cannon fires. The crack and groan of collapsing structures, screaming. We had been picking up the sounds of the National Defense Forces engagement for the past 90 seconds. I focused on what was coming through the radio. Via the CP's data link, I understood what was happening. The NDF was attempting to seal a beta infiltration point, what was typically referred to as a gate. The plan was to position large autonomous interception systems around the gate's perimeter and obliterate anything that came through. But the installation had fallen behind schedule, and now they were being asked to perform the rather impressive trick of holding back a beta surge and setting up the equipment at the same time. This is Immortals Alpha Unit, National Defense 9 Platoon. Do you read? This is Wakisaka 9, reading you loud and clear. You're the private military company, Immortals. The NDF had answered Sword Dancer's call. Confirmed. Per our contract with the Japanese government, we are here to support your unit. Grateful for the assistance. We're trying to get the autonomous interception systems installed. Place yourself under my command until this engagement is concluded. An information window activated on its own, displaying data on the large autonomous interception systems. The NDF was in the process of installing. Large autonomous interception system, close-in weapon system, sentry gun configuration. A sensor-driven automated weapon that acquired and engaged targets without a human trigger. The systems were connected to what appeared to be massive supply vehicles, presumably part of the ammunition feed mechanism. One TSF was visible, working to lock the nearest unit onto its designated coordinates. Once that was done, 3 CWIS would be trained on a single gate, positioned at roughly 40-degree offsets from each other, forming a partial encirclement. But something was fighting that plan. Beta that had already poured through the gate were moving toward the interception system, and the NDF's TSF contingent was scrambling to intercept them before they could interfere. Relief in the voices coming over the NDF radio net. The sound of people who had been waiting for backup. I heard it. Private military company. Immortals. Simplified mercenaries. An organization that generates revenue through war. And Immortals. The Undying. A bold name for a mercenary outfit. Then again, maybe the irony was the point. Maybe it meant they simply didn't count the bodies. A chill ran up my spine. The unit communication channel opened before I could dwell on it. White Fang and I take point. Dawn Purple, Snow White. Suppression fire from the rear. No hesitation in Sword Dancers. Mitsurugi's voice. I'm covering for these useless NDF clowns. Great. Quiet, Snow White. Distance to combat zone. 1500. They're being pushed back. Takamura cut off Akatu's complaint cleanly. The respect she carried toward Mitsurugi was evident even in that. All units, confirm F systems, engaging, weapons free. Mitsurugi's order, and the Immortals platoon drove itself into the densest concentration of beta, centered on the grappler class cluster. Ha! A sweeping slash, the Shiranui's forward momentum folded into the blade's arc. She carved through a grappler class the way the call-sign Sword Dancer implied she would. Mitsurugi's expression didn't change. To her, this was simply the expected outcome. Then the amber gold TSF, Takamura Yui, in the Takamakazuchi. Her long blade came down in a diagonal cut, the tip breaking the sound barrier, a sharp crack splitting the air around it. True to its name, the divine thunder of a war god, grappler class after grappler class was cut down. Magnificent White Fang. You as well, sword dancer. I couldn't breathe. This was close quarters combat. And then from the other side of the radio, a scream that cut through everything else. The NDF pilots. Don't come near me! The sound of an assault cannon firing in panics. Depleted uranium rounds tearing a tank class apart far past the point of necessity. Overkill obvious and desperate. The NDF's TSS were Gekishans. I recognized them instantly, the data already surfacing. First-generation tactical surface fighters, among the earliest produced. Low mobility, but cheap. The kind of machine you could field in numbers without breaking a budget. There was something almost maternal about the design. It had taught a generation of pilots how to fly, but the age of its basic architecture couldn't be hidden. And on the front line, the pilots who drew them considered it a bad draw. The Immortals seemed to be better equipped than the NDF. A small observation I noted to myself. Something to ask someone about when the fighting was done? Please, protect the interception systems. The 9 platoon commander, his voice cracking. Understood. Mitsurugi's shout coiled tight. A single slash, a grappler class split cleanly in two. The destructive force hit me again like a physical thing. But the gate wasn't stopping. Tank class and grappler class continued to pour through like a burst pipe, no sign of slowing. White Fang plenty left to cut. Snow White, Dawn Purple, mind your fire, don't clip us. Darn, Mitsurugi's order. All 3 responded and moved into position. White Fang drew alongside, blade up, the 2 of them working the beta swarm like matadors. The herd, momentum broken and striking power reduced, was met with 36mm fire from Snow White and Dawn Purple. They're exceptional. I watched the calm, practiced efficiency of their movements and felt something close to awe. And then, almost immediately, unease. They looked mid-teens, all of them. These were girls, and they moved through this like veterans. Why? When I thought about it, they hadn't panicked when their commanding officer lost her memory mid-battle. Annoyed, yes. But underneath the irritation was an atmosphere of people who had already built the death of a commanding officer into their calculations. It was simply a variable they had accounted for. How does someone get that comfortable with a battlefield at that age? Hey, die. A scream over the open NDF channel, raw, unfiltered. There it was. The gap between the 2 units was stark and undeniable. Gee, get it off! A shriek that cut through the noise. One of the Gigashins escorting the interception systems had a tank class latched onto its shoulder. The jaws of the creature were working through the shoulder armor. Shinome! Shake it loose! It'll eat through. Metal grinding against metal. The tank class was moving along the surface of the Gikishin, working its mandibles around the shoulder plating. Shinonomi's machine deployed its short blade and tried to scrape the creature off. It wasn't working. The tank class adjusted, flowing up and around the blade, and bit into the jump unit instead. Chijira-san. The words came out of me before thought could get involved. We have to help her. All right. But it was Takamura who answered. Acceleration. Draw. Strike. A flash of amber gold. I couldn't believe what I saw. The Takamikazuchi's blade had passed between the Gikishin's jump unit and the tank class clamped to it, and removed only the beta, cleanly, both halves, The Gikishin was untouched, not a millimeter of damage. I sat with it for a moment. There was no other word for it. Beautiful. The speed of it, the force of it, the precision. I knew, in some rational part of my mind, that finding beauty in an act of destruction wasn't entirely healthy. But my spine disagreed. Something in my body had recognized it regardless of what my mind thought. I'm alive. Shinonomi's exhale over the radio. The sound of someone who had just remembered what survival felt like. Leave the beta to us. Get that interception system online. Move. Yeah, yes, ma'am. The gap was undeniable. Mitsurugi, Meiya, Takamura, Yui, Chijira, Sayoi, Akatoki Mashiro. What I was watching was in a different category from the NDF forces entirely. Then I swallowed whatever came next, deliberately. A mercenary unit that outperforms a national military. Something about that shape felt wrong, felt like it should mean something. But this wasn't the moment to pull at that thread, and I wasn't sure I had the right to ask. What I was certain of, as long as the Immortals were here, those interception systems would be installed. It took approximately 10 minutes. High-velocity rounds began cycling in steady bursts. Beta that surged through the gate were destroyed before they could spread onto the surface. The machines didn't tire, didn't lose focus, didn't flinch. Until they ran dry, this gate was sealed. Well done. Suppression of that infiltration point is confirmed successful. Move to the coordinates transmitted via data link. Resupply should be available there. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. NDF 9 platoon made contact with their headquarters and were commended for the operation's success. We were permitted to listen in on the exchange, but NDF command made no reference to the Immortals, not once. Does the NDF command structure not issue direct orders to private military TSF units? I couldn't remember the chain of command. Another question for later. An electronic chime, a communication window opened. The mature woman from before. Chinguchi Marimo. My immediate superior, I adjusted my understanding. New orders. You are to assist the transport of civilian stragglers in Aoba Ward, Yokohama, to the coast. The mission is support and escort for refugee extraction operations. How many civilians? Mitsurugi's voice, slightly clipped. Over 300 at present count. 300. Nakamura murmured. Way too many. Akatoki said immediately after. Besides, the evacuation order went out ages ago. I'm not convinced there's a point in rescuing people who chose to stay. Snow White, you were not given the floor. Do not break into a communication between the unit commander and the CP. Oh, so I'm supposed to stay quiet and die on command? That's a joke. Was that insubordination? As the administrator, even a non-functional one, what was the appropriate response here? The obvious answer was to say something, but nothing came to me. Not one word. You consider this a suicide order? You must have been living through a rather comfortable war. Takamura. And when I looked, there was something close to contempt at the edge of her expression. What did you just say? The air between the two of them went tight. Both of you, that is enough. Mitsurugi. My apologies, please continue. Jinguji appeared to nod. Alpha unit will accompany 9 platoon, eliminate beta contacts en route, and facilitate the rescue operation. You will be moving away from the coastline. Support will be limited, and the civilian transport will not be simple. But I believe you are capable. The tactical window expanded, displaying the rendezvous coordinates. Understood. Mitsurugi's acknowledgement ended the CP communication. She moved immediately to open a channel with 9 platoon, coordinating the operation. A brief gap in activity. I leaned toward Chijira and kept my voice low. Inside the combat control unit, no one else would hear. Can I ask something? Are Takamura-san and Akatoki-san on bad terms? What brought this on, Administrator? Feeling like doing your actual job? Oh. Emotional friction during an operation could become a problem, so I thought. Was this what being an administrator looked like? It felt awkward on me. Fair enough. Takamura-san tends to hold herself and others to a high standard. Akatu-san tends to find gaps and fill them with complaints. They probably don't mix well. That tracked with what I'd seen. What about Mitsurugi-san? As next in seniority, does she not step in? She doesn't say anything. I think she believes conflicts between individuals are theirs to resolve. Is that how it works? I could follow the logics. Forcing a superficial truce from above changes nothing. Real reconciliation might require the tension to play out. But that didn't mean it was right for an active operation. Does it worry you, Administrator? Well, yes, a bit. So even without your memory, you're still you. You worry too much. I think that must be the shape of your soul. I felt heat rise to my face before I could stop it. Why are you blushing? It's not an insult. No one said anything bad about you. What was my relationship with Chijira-san before all this? She had known me. She knew a version of me that I had no access to. What was I like before I lost my memory? An idiot, a total idiot, just walking around with a blank look on your face all day. Akatoki cutting in without invitation. I felt my face go hot. And realized in the same moment that she had been able to hear a conversation I thought was private. That is an uncharitable characterization. I did not interact with the administrator extensively, but my impression was of someone composed and measured. Mitsurugi, calm. It seemed she had finished with 9 platoon. I'm with sword dancer on that. A bit too straightforward for their own good, perhaps, but I have no poor impressions of the administrator. If anything, they worked hard. Warmth in Takamura's voice, a smile in it. Thank you. I found something to say at last. Mitsurugi and Takamura's assessments were not bad, as these things go. The administrator was a fairly ordinary person from before all this, I think. In a time like this one, that's rarer than you'd expect. Most people get worn to an edge, like Snow White. Chijira's tone was light. Excuse me? You picking a fight, Chijira-chan? See? All edges. Chijira glanced back over her shoulder, smiling. You'd better remember this. When we're back, I'm settling it with you personally. A look of cheerful resignation crossed Chijira's face, and she turned back. I'm relieved the administrator, who lost her memory, didn't turn out like Snow White. I took the words in, pleased and embarrassed in roughly equal measure. White fang to dawn purple. Takamura, reaching out to Chijira directly, I listened. Take good care of the administrator. Not remembering anything must be frightening. Understood. Looking after people who are anxious is something I'm rather good at. A quiet laugh from Takamura. I thought I agreed with her assessment. Honestly, you never change. Administrator. If you feel uncertain about anything, contact me directly. Problems that seem insurmountable often aren't, once you talk through them with someone. Don't let the memory loss make you feel like you're less than you are. That's what having a team is for. Thank you, I'll take you up on that. Not feeling like dead weight was easier said than done, but Takamura's words had, against my expectations, actually helped. Good, Dawn Purple, you as well. Keep an eye on the administrator. Of course, leave it to me. I'm counting on you, both. Takamura cut the channel, something like amusement still in her voice. So, if anything comes up, the administrator should come to me. Yes, I won't hesitate. Even in exchange, this light shifted something. In a place like this, I was starting to think that might be one of the most important things there was. Grrr. From the forward seat. That's embarrassing. I'm starving. I really should not have given away that yokin. You seem remarkably at ease, Shijiro-san. Not at ease at all. It's just humans are animals that get hungry. Chijira delivered this with the expression of a philosopher who had arrived at great personal cost, at a very obvious truth. 04. The real world, among the crowd. Shinanomi Shino. 1 bag per person. That's all you can take. Please make room for everyone else. A ground forces soldier was working a megaphone, directing the civilian stragglers toward the trucks. Shino manipulated her TSF's camera array and watched the crowd. On the grounds of a school built into the middle of a large residential district. National Defense Force transport trucks sat in a line, engines running. The faces of the soldiers stationed around them were drawn tight. 10 vehicles in total. If her memory was right, that type of truck could carry around 20 soldiers at capacity. Moving over 500 civilians at once was going to be a problem. That reality settled over her like something heavy. Don't think about what you want, think about what you have. She murmured it to herself inside the control unit. Just getting a transport column this far into an active combat zone was already a miracle. Beta advances had rendered most of the main roads unusable. Practically speaking, only TSFs and military rotorcraft could move effectively through this battlefield. And even the rotorcraft couldn't gain altitude. Any higher and the laser class would paint them out of the sky. The transport unit had navigated here by reading continuously updated information, picking through viable routes. Threading around beta concentrations every step of the way, she had nothing but respect for that. The camera caught one of the civilians arguing as they were pressed into the cargo bed. Her chest tightened. Amr's, not right now, just get in. She understood it, on some level. The frustration of being squeezed into an unfamiliar space. The fear of being taken from everything you knew. The near certainty that everything left behind would be gone. Reading their faces wasn't difficult. But this was not the moment for those expressions. This wasn't supposed to be how it looked. She'd grown up watching tokusatsu, not the magical girl shows her brothers tried to push on her. Those had never interested her. It was the hero series she'd come back to every time. Heroes who fought for the people, people who cheered for the heroes. She had joined the National Defense Force because of that. She had wanted to be someone who fought evil. And instead, she was watching civilians stare back at the soldiers sent to rescue them with tired, irritated faces. People who had ignored government orders and stayed in a combat zone and were now silently demanding to be saved. And she wasn't angry at them, exactly. She just felt a sadness that had no particular target. Soldiers were still people, being asked to put their lives on the line for this, for people who had made a deliberate choice to stay, wasn't something you simply accepted. They all had families. And yet, every soldier here was doing their job, and doing it with composure. And that composure was making her chest ache more than the anger would have. There's no more time. Just get on the trucks and let us get you out. A volley of cannon fire. The crack of the reports told her the 120mm mounts were engaged. She pulled up the tactical map. Beta contact confirmed. Less than 3 kilometers out in a straight line. The mercenaries were holding at 3 kilometers. They were buying time. The civilians needed to be moving before that window closed. Immortals. The private military company. In the engagement earlier, she had, in the most literal sense, owed them her life. The tank class clamped to her TSF, dispatched in a single cut, her jump unit untouched. Something she couldn't have done herself. Not yet. But someday. She noticed she had tightened her grip on the controls. She forced one slow breath and looked back at the civilians being loaded into the trucks. The frustration hadn't gone away. It was just somewhere she couldn't afford to put it right now. Communication window. Her platoon commander. We should be ready to move in about 5 minutes. Prepare for departure. Shinonami, you're on point. Acknowledged. She heard the flatness in her own voice. They would have to navigate passable routes, avoid beta concentrations, and keep the column intact. If it went wrong, 500 people would die. She was one of the people responsible for making sure it didn't. 3 kilometers north of the civilian extraction point, the Immortals' 4 TSFs were running a delaying engagement. Not a sweep, not a destruction mission, just buying time, holding the line until the civilians could move. That was quite the full house back there, wasn't it, Administrator? The number of stragglers gathered on that school grounds had exceeded all estimates. Whether everyone could be extracted was still an open question. You surprised? The loading rate was over 200%. They'd have to leave some behind, no way around it. The karaoke, cutting in on Chijira. Calling people stupid makes you the stupid one, you know? Chijira swept her 36mm cannon across a tank class cluster. At this range and ammunition expenditure, a group this size was manageable. Distance and rounds, that's all it took. Where did you even learn to talk? A kindergarten. Chijira seemed to be reaching for a comeback and finding nothing. Her lower lip pushed out. Her vocabulary for insults was, in fairness, noticeably limited. Takamura's window opened. But the numbers, genuinely, were beyond what we expected. They shouldn't even have been able to keep the gas and electricity running. Her sentence trailed off. Because it is a homeland they cannot surrender, even if it costs them their lives. Some places are worth staying for, to some people. Something in Mitsurugi's voice carried more than the words. I wondered, briefly, whether she had lost something like that herself. A place she had been made to leave. Their homelands, their history, things I couldn't remember even knowing about them. I had nothing to offer, no words that fit. Just the thin, hollow feeling of being an empty vessel standing next to people with weight in them. We were unable to prevent this outcome, that our strength was insufficient. I can only express my deepest regret. I stopped. Takamura's phrasing, abruptly, completely transformed. It wasn't the register of a colleague. It was the language of a vassal addressing royalty. She was directing it at Mitsurugi. I found myself staring at Mitsurugi's expression before I could think about it. She exhaled slowly. White Fang, we are equals. There is no need for that kind of deference. But, that is, I understand, but you are thinking of someone to whom you have pledged loyalty, who happens to resemble me. I am not that person. And if physical resemblance is the measure, Dawn Purple resembles me just as much, does she not? I mention it myself because it seems relevant. The two of us are remarkably similar, like sisters, or something rather more unsettling. She was right. Mitsurugi and Chijira were strikingly alike. I had suspected blood relation myself. Dawn Purple is completely different. There is no resemblance whatsoever. That person would never allow their stomach to growl in front of others, I'm absolutely certain. Chijira's lip pushed out again. That's a fair point, though. Akatoki murmured, just audibly enough. But the question stayed with me, pledged loyalty. In this age, in this world, did people still give that kind of allegiance to individuals? And who was the person Takamura was thinking of? Though I confess, even I have been known to succumb to hunger. Please do not place me too high. And yet, my instincts tell me otherwise. I would simply prefer to be treated as a peer. But that would be... The pattern continued. Takamura insisting on deference, Mitsurugi gently refusing it. The question of who Takamura was thinking of when she looked at Mitsurugi gnawed at me like something I couldn't stop pressing on. I've heard something about this, actually. Chijira said it like she'd just remembered something useful, in the entirely wrong tone for the moment. Supposedly, there are 3 people in the world who look exactly alike. And anyone who meets their own double is fated to die soon after. That's a doppelganger story. As I said, Sword Dancer and Dawn Purple look nothing alike. You lack refinement. Or fair refinement. Perhaps I do fall short in that regard. I shall endeavor to improve. Dazzling equivalent. How does anyone learn enough to get that stupid? Akatoki. Dawn Purple, I apologize. I did not intend to disparage you quite so thoroughly. Takamura with genuine contrition, even with someone she didn't always get along with. If she had gone too far, she acknowledged it. I didn't expect to be insulted by White Fang of all people. Forgive me. Please, forgive me. The regret was written clearly across her face. She cared about these things more than she probably wanted to. White Fang, I like chestnut yoken. I also like sweet potato. Where is this going? I like water yoken and paste yoken as well. They're caloric and sweet. Understood. I'll arrange something when we're back. You promise? I understood now. Chijira had leveraged Takamura's guilt with surgical precision. She was beaming. The contrast with Mitsurugi really was stark. Mitsurugi would never extort yoken out of a teammate's regret. That much was clear. A radio chime. The 9 platoon lead calling in. Civilian boarding is nearly complete. We'll move to the port once it's done. We'd like you to link up with us. Understood. Mitsurugi answered, acting unit commander. Please hold. It's reasonable to assume there are still stragglers in hiding nearby. Should we not extend the evacuation call a few more minutes? Jinguji's voice cutting into the channel from the CP. However, the longer we delay, the more danger we create for the civilians already aboard. You are correct, but we cannot return to this area. A few minutes more may be worth it. The 9 platoon commander hesitated. We're already at load capacity. Taking on more is not feasible. The NDF's priority was clear. The civilians already recovered brought home safely. Anyone still unaccounted for had, in their calculus, already been written off. What would the right call be? If I had my memory, what would I say? Delaying means the people we already have might die too, yeah? So let's just go. We don't want to lose what we've already got, do we? Akatoki. I did not give you the floor, Snow White. Yeah, sorry, equivalent. Akatoki giving back talk to a superior officer, completely unbothered. There was a consistency to it that was, in its own way, impressive. I didn't think I'd be capable of it, even with my memory intact. No, that pilot is right. We cannot afford casualties among the civilians already secured. The 9 platoon commander. He sounded almost grateful to have been given a reason he could use. Upon completion of boarding for the civilians currently on the grounds, we move out to Hanmoku Wharf. This is final. He cut the channel. The conversation was over. I glanced at Jinguji's expression in the communication window. Calm, composed, whatever lay beneath it wasn't readable. Hanmoku Wharf. Under clear conditions, 30 minutes or so, but Mitsurugi's voice had lost its edge. The transport column would be lucky to manage 40 kilometers per hour. Debris, impassable streets, beta concentrations they'd have to fight through or route around while keeping the trucks intact. Nothing about this job is easy. Chijira in the forward seat. The tone was almost breezy, and somehow that helped. We'll manage. Actually, I have a question. Is it possible to pull data from the surveillance satellites? Technically, yes, if you want to. What's gotten into you, Administrator? A sudden burst of motivation? She said it with something like approval. I felt faintly embarrassed anyway. Not remembering things and having nothing to do aren't the same problem. The procedures came back through muscle memory. My hands knew what to do even when my mind didn't. I opened the map window, called up the gaze input keyboard, and started sorting through the available data. If I just sat here using the amnesia as an excuse, someone was going to get hurt. I didn't know where that certainty came from. I just felt it. 05. The real world. Departure, and then Shirasawa, Naoto. The refugee transport operation had become exactly the kind of mission the word difficult was invented for. Debris blocking the route had to be cleared with the TSF's manipulator arms. In some cases, there was no other option but to lift the transport vehicles bodily and carry them over the wreckage. The beta seemed to sense the column. Clusters that had appeared scattered and disorganized kept materializing ahead of a unit in sequence. And the ammunition expenditure from dealing with them had already exceeded projections by a significant margin. The arrangement settled into a rhythm. The NDF's TSF contingent handled escort for the transports while the Immortals took every engagement that came up. There was no other way to manage it. 70 minutes since departure. Approximately 3 kilometers remained to the port where the evacuation ships were waiting. The end was finally visible. Alpha Unit had taken no serious damage, but the physical and mental wear was showing on all of them. And then 4 large beta concentrations near the evacuation ships. They'll catch us during boarding. The objective was Hanmoku Wharf, current position, Ishikawa-cho, and in the surrounding wards. Konanku Kaminaria, around Totsuka Station in Totsuka Ward, Midorigaoka in Izumi Ward, and the Hazawa Interchange. Medium-scale beta clusters had deployed and were moving. There are destroyer class mixed into those groups. If boarding takes too long, that's it for everyone. Akatoki said the cold truth plainly. Sword Dancer to CP, is there any possibility of changing the boarding location? Difficult, more accurately, pointless. Hanmoku Wharf was designated because it was optimal. Given that the beta clusters are moving faster than the transport column, any change to the operation plan doesn't merit serious consideration. Jinguji's response was equally cold. We will establish a defensive line at Nakaku Yamashitacho and hold until the ships have cleared the dock. High-rise structures are still standing in that district. It should provide reasonable cover from laser-class irradiation. I remembered Yamashita as a commercial district. The details surfaced cleanly. Then Please wait. That position is too close to the boarding point. The moment that line is breached, the operation fails. I had spoken before Sword Dancer could answer. The words were already out. All 4 communication windows went still. Every face in them froze. I kept going, partly to cover the embarrassment, partly because stopping now would be worse. We should push forward to the vicinity of the Kawakaminaka interchange and engage there. 3 of the 4 clusters are approaching from the west. That's where we need to meet them. Silence. Too far, I overstepped. The thought arrived immediately after the words, an amnesiac with no business running operations just told the CP what to do. Of course I follow your reasoning, but what about the cluster near Hazawa? The northeastern group. Left alone, it would head directly for Hanmoku Wharf. When it arrived, the NDF TSFs protecting the refugees would be the ones fighting it. Jinguji's eyes said the rest, and we both know the NDF can't hold that. We engage the 3 western clusters at the Kawakaminaka interchange and conduct a fighting withdrawal toward Hodogaya Park, drawing the Hazawa group in as we go. Mobile defense, no fixed positions. Jinguji's expression shifted. She was working through it, feasible but demanding. A prepared defensive line forgave some errors. Mobile defense at this scale depended almost entirely on the pilots executing it. The point of this operation isn't to protect the boarding location itself. It's to buy time for boarding to complete. If that's the objective, then. Not point defense, time. Once the civilians were clear, the TSF unit could disengage. And without the refugees to protect, disengaging wasn't difficult. I let that implication sit in the air without saying it outright. Jinguji closed her eyes, then opened them. Understood. I will present the administrator's plan to the NDF. The Immortals held a contract with the Japanese government. But in the actual conduct of TSF operations, the Immortals' experience put them a clear step ahead. And the NDF had learned to lean on that. The earlier engagement had made that relationship obvious. You remain a tactician even without your memory. Jinguji smiled. Thank you very much. The relief of having a superior accept a proposal was, I found, considerably greater than I had anticipated. In their communication windows, I could see Mitsurugi and Takamura both smiling. Akatoki's window had gone dark. Her expression was unavailable for observation. And in the forward seat, Chijira's long hair was swaying in a way that suggested she was pleased. Even if I couldn't see her face. In that case, let's move quickly. Can we request resupply? At Mitsurugi's words, Jinguji indicated she would negotiate with the NDF. 10 minutes later, resupplied, Immortals Alpha unit began moving toward the Kawakaminaka interchange. Red emergency lighting cast a dim glow across the Combat Information Center. The hum of climate control, the steady pulse of electronic tones. Across the full width of one wall, a bank of large monitors, multiple operators, each with their own station and equipment. Jinguji Murimo was working her mouse. The markers on the tactical map were moving. The interception operation had begun. An electronic chime, and the CIC's sealed door opened. A figure in a white coat stepped. Kouzuki Yuko, Ph.D., Managing Director, Immortal's private military company. The click of heels on linoleum, sharp, measured, entirely out of place in a military command center. She gave no indication of caring. I swear, summoning me in the middle of a war, those decrepit old fossils can rot. Her opening remark, Jinguji suppressed a smile. Some things don't change regardless of the world. How's it looking? At Kouzuki's question, Jinguji pulled up the full Kanto map. At the macro level, two areas dominated, the Mount Akagi vicinity in the north and the Yokohama area to the south. Echo through India units deployed to northern Kanto are engaged around Mount Akagi. Attrition rate is 19%. NDF-TSF forces in the same sector have taken 62% losses. They've begun withdrawing. The markers for 5 Immortals TSF units were labeled in phonetic alphabet code: Echo, Foxtrot, Golf, Hotel, India. Deployed across the northern Kanto theater. The NDF is in pieces. They didn't even know when to pull back. Outstanding. Kouzuki said it to herself, answered herself, and moved on. Were you briefed on the situation over there? Nothing. They were just probing to see how much combat capacity we have left. Minor bureaucrats playing at being clever. She added, either way, now that the decision to abandon Kanto has finally been made, we should accelerate the Akagi withdrawal. That's correct, but if we pull back now, NDF attrition will increase significantly. And someone might claim we deliberately timed our withdrawal to make ourselves look indispensable? Jinguji nodded. Apparently thought of as that mercenary. Kouzuki's tone was dry. What about Yokohama? Has that idiot's head come back online? Alpha Unit is conducting defensive operations to cover the evacuation ship's departure. As for the administrator's memory, not yet. Kouzuki's expression curdled. Jinguji moved to cushion it. However, operational effectiveness appears undiminished. They presented a workable tactical plan just a short while ago. Platoon-level tactics? Someone with no memory is planning operations. What exactly is going on? I honestly don't know. Jinguji didn't have an answer, and she knew it. The memory loss was evident. The capability somehow persisting alongside it made no sense by any framework she had. Kouzuki pressed a slender finger to her chin and was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then, almost in a whisper, could be the imprinting, or it may be something else. Understood. The voice that answered came from the station beside Jinguji, a girl, early teens with silver hair. And start withdrawal prep for the Akagi units. I can rebuild combat strength. Being used as convenient cannon fodder is something I won't tolerate. Are you certain? This will invite scrutiny. I don't care. Accusations have no answer to reality. The Japanese government would reach the point where it could not survive without relying on a private military company. Kouzuki, Yuko said it as though it were already done. For the love of... Does anyone up there think about what it's like for us? Snow White's shout accompanied a burst of depleted uranium rounds that glanced off a grappler class's forearm and punched trail of craters into the building behind it. Every time I saw it happen, I couldn't quite process it. A 36 million rounds. At close range, that caliber would reduce a human body to vapor in a fraction of a second. And the grappler class simply brushed it off. Sparks off the carapace of the forearm. Wasted ammunition. My turn! The amber gold Takamikazuchi dropped in from nowhere, driving its long blade through the grappler's defensive posture. Exploiting the exact opening the suppression fire had created, the coordination was immaculate. White Fang's swordsmanship is extraordinary. Chijira sounded genuinely impressed. I agreed completely. A chime. Mitsurugi's window opened. Group C has locked on. That's a through, C. All three are engaged with us. Yes. I felt my fist close inside the control unit. First, we draw the beta clusters toward Katokuracho. Then we push toward Hazawa. Acknowledged. Mitsurugi's order, answered by Takamura and Chijira in the same breath. This is working. The certainty was physical, a pressure in my chest, real and unmistakable. The plan, consolidate all 4 clusters into one mass and keep them moving on our terms? This is exactly what that stupid administrator always does, wringing every last drop out of us until we break. Akatoki's voice hit like a blast of cold air. That's not what I intended. I had found what I thought was the best solution. I had believed, genuinely, that this team could execute it. But the possibility that I had miscalculated, that I had underestimated the cost. Someone had just named that possibility out loud, and I couldn't dismiss it. My chest tightened, not from Chijira's piloting. I have no memory, and I propose an operation that puts these people in danger. Subordinates can't refuse their commander's orders. Of course she's angry. She has every right to be. The sequence of events I had set in motion crystallized in my mind all at once. And the ground felt less stable than it had a moment ago. What should I do now? Apologies were already forming, lining up. The administrator's operations do tend toward the unreasonable. Mitsurugi's window, her expression against all expectation, carried a trace of amusement. You are not wrong. Unreasonable, yes, but not impossible. It's a rather odious kind of precision, actually. Demanding the exact most that we are capable of. Takamura, somewhere between exasperation and the beginning of a smile. You're doing well, Administrator. The only one complaining is Snow White. In the forward seat, Chijira laughed. Snow White would complain about the air she breathes? Administrator, don't give it another thought. Amara nodding to herself with conviction. Shut it, White Fang. I'm not like you. I'm not some stone-faced Konoya type. Konoya. Imperial Guard, if my instinct was right. A term for those who guarded the nobility. Did an organization like that still exist in this era? Is White Fang from a military family? The question left my mouth before I decided to ask it. You could say that. My family has been in the business of arms making for generations. Arms making. Weapons manufacture. I had a faint sense of a defense equipment agency, some institution along those lines, and wondered if that was what she meant. Generations of service in that world. Did you become a soldier to carry on that tradition? Arms making. I feel like I'm hearing that for the first time. It had occurred to me that all 4 of them were young women. Choosing a military path still struck me as unusual, somehow, though in this world perhaps it shouldn't have. There was a time when I thought that. though I suppose I haven't entirely stepped away from the work, even now. The trailing edge of that sentence didn't sound like Takamura, a hesitation she didn't usually show. Was she at peace with where she had ended up? Or was there something she was carrying that I couldn't see? I found myself wanting to ask. Idiot. Someone with no memory thinks everything is the first time they've heard it. I feel like I'm hearing that for the first time. What does that even mean for you? Akatoki, precisely correct. The heat in my cheeks was immediate. Beta classifications and TSF data came back to me. But personal history, relationships, everything human, remained completely inaccessible. I had no way of knowing what I already knew about Takamura's past. Let us save the conversation for later. What comes next is where this gets difficult. Mitsurugi's voice brought everyone's expression into focus. Holding 4 beta clusters in a running engagement without destroying them. Keeping them consolidated and moving where we needed them to go, for however long it took the boarding to complete. The timeline was entirely out of our hands. But these people would do it. Oh. I had no memory to base that on. I believed it anyway. 06. The real world. Omen. Shinonomi Shino. Transport vehicle secured. Ready when you are. No laser class response in the vicinity. 902, you are cleared for flight. The civilian boarding had fallen behind schedule. A small beta group had destroyed part of the port facilities, which meant the evacuation ships were riding at anchor 300 meters offshore. The solution the NDF had arrived at was exactly as ungainly as it sounded. TSFs would grip the transport trucks in their manipulator arms, fly them out over the water, and set them down directly on the ship's decks. Understood, Shinana, beginning approach. She brought the jump unit output up slowly, every nerve in her body redirected to attitude control. The vehicle in her arms was carrying civilians, as many as it could hold. Dropping it was not an option she was entertaining. The TSF's feet left the ground. She fixed her attention on keeping the horizon level. Altitude 50 meters, speed 30 kilometers per hour, steady course toward the transport ship offshore. No laser class in the vicinity. That was what command said. But if even one had been missed, she would be shot down, and everyone inside the vehicle she was carrying would go with her. The flight itself was only a few minutes, but piloting a TSF at low speed, loaded with a vehicle, without so much as a tremor, it was the kind of task that ate concentration alive. If I'm the best at flying, that doesn't mean I have to do all the flying. She could feel her nerves fraying at the edges. It was true that within the platoon she had the finest touch on the controls. Not right now. Right now it just meant she was the one doing this, again. Focused on keeping her speed minimal and her attitude perfect, so that no one in the cargo got thrown around. Humanoid TSFs caught the wind differently than aircraft. The shape meant far more exposure to lateral force. Lose your balance with a loaded vehicle in your arms, and the consequences were not recoverable. Just a little more. Warning tones nagged at her ears like someone standing over her shoulder. The helipad marking on the transport ship's deck, the H designating rotary wing landing clearance, came up beneath her. She brought the TSF down to a crouch as gently as she could manage and set the vehicle onto the marked surface. Sweat on her forehead, a long exhale. Safe. She heard herself say good before she'd decided to. Well done, Shinami. Get back immediately. Next run. Understood. Moving. Irritation. The thought came and went before she could help it. You could do a run yourself instead of just giving orders. and I would have liked at least a moment to feel good about that. She lifted the now empty vehicle from the deck and rose again at low speed. During ground transport, the trucks had been permitted to exceed their rated capacity. Aerial transport was a different matter, which meant the process was exactly as tedious as it sounded. Have the civilians disembark, load only rated capacity. Fly them to the ship, fly the empty truck back, have the next group board. Repeat. She pulled up the map window and confirmed the beta positions. The red markers were not close, but they weren't far either. Someone's holding them there. The Immortals were still fighting. She could hear it. Distant cannon fire, intermittent, rolling in from somewhere inland. Shinanum, Shino listened to it and thought that Arna Jingurumar Imo. Chief, this came in. What was handed to her was a single handwritten note. Jinguji Marimo took it from the blonde operator and read it. You're certain about this, Piatafu? Yes, absolutely certain. At that answer, Jinguji pressed her thumb and index finger to the bridge of her nose. Exhaled slowly. I've confirmed the location as a precaution, and I haven't shared this with the NDF. She had felt something wrong the moment Piatafu handed over a note rather than filing a formal report. Now she understood why. Amateur radio. Her father's hobby, apparently. Both parents are deceased, it seems. I see. If both parents were gone, she should have gone through official channels. Unless she tried and was turned away. Jinguji wanted to put her head in her hands. Since the beta appeared, Japan had lost something. The whole world had. The capacity to extend help past what was strictly necessary. That had been one of the first things to go. One of the requirements the Japanese government had included in the Immortals contract for this operation was civilian rescue. The timing couldn't be worse. She couldn't keep the feeling entirely off her face. If only contact had been established during the initial civilian collection. They were close enough then. It would have taken almost nothing. If the Japanese government learned that a civilian had been found alive, the order to the Immortals would be automatic. No politician and no civil servant could stand before the public and say, we determined the risk was too high and left them. Which meant a rescue order to the mercenaries was a certainty, not a prediction. Civilians and mercenaries, I suppose, were the ones whose lives are considered cheaper. It didn't matter how much had been invested in training a single soldier. Some things shouldn't be allowed to change, even when the world was falling apart. She noticed Piatafu looking at her expression with something careful in her eyes, and felt a flash of irritation she immediately recognized as misdirected. The note in her hand. If she crushed it, the stranded civilian would simply cease to exist as far as this command post was concerned. Piatifu had brought it as a note, rather than a formal report, precisely to make that choice available. What's the status of Alpha Unit? Engaged near Hodogaya Park. They've successfully drawn in the beta clusters. Buying time, and only that. They didn't have the firepower to destroy the groups they were holding. Bravo and Charlie units? Bravo's engaged in Odawara. Charlie is fighting alongside NDF forces in Shinagawa, but their attrition rate has exceeded 30%. Charlie had been pushed hard to keep NDF TSF forces from collapsing. She had done that, and she owned it. Linking up with a unit that had been deployed relatively nearby was no longer something she could expect. How long until the evacuation ship can depart? The next run is the last. Once civilian transport is complete, they can move immediately. No time. She made a fist where no one could see it. Notify the NDF that a civilian has been located and open a line to Alpha Unit. 07. The real world, the way we live and die. Shirasawa Naoto. So, the location of the remaining civilian is confirmed? Sword Dancer's window! Mitsurugi composed, no sign of agitation. Correct. 2 survivors. Location, Asahicho Machida. Jinguji Morimo gave the address precisely. Machida. Shijira murmured it from the forward seat. Over 20 kilometers in a straight line from their current position. Not far for a TSF, but it meant pushing through a battlefield scattered with beta concentrations. We don't have time to waste. We should go. White Fang, Takamura. The urgency in her voice was a shade sharper than usual, driven by her sense of duty, perhaps. She was pressing forward before the discussion had properly begun. Hold on. By the time we get there, they might already be dead. Snow White's objection, Akatoki, lacking in sentiment, but not wrong. The evacuation ship has already sailed, hasn't it? The NDF has completed their mission. Our job is done. It's over. A few minutes ago, the evacuation ship carrying the rescued civilians had left Yokohama and was heading out into the Pacific. Once it was 20 or 30 kilometers offshore, the curvature of the Earth would hide it below the horizon, beyond the effective range of the laser class. After that, it would turn north and make for a port in the Tohoku region. The report of laser irradiation zone clearance would arrive soon. When it did, the immortals would be able to stand down. That was how this was supposed to end. And then, at this exact moment, a report of newly discovered civilian stragglers. Akatoki's anger wasn't something I could entirely argue with. Even mercenaries can refuse requests that carry excessive risk, can't they? And there's no NDF support anymore, right? 4 TSS pushing into beta-controlled territory for a rescue. This isn't a Hollywood film. Do you have any idea how much these machines cost? She threw the words out, her pale skin flushed. You're out of your mind if you think this is heroism. The oversight was our failure. Taking responsibility for it is obvious. Takamura was fixed on the rescue, something underneath that was urgent. She seemed to be pushing harder than the situation alone explained. Listen, you think it's acceptable to risk a TSF for 2 people? These things cost tens of billions each, and that doesn't even count what it took to train the pilots. She wasn't wrong about the numbers. A single TSF ran to the tens of billions of yen in manufacturing costs. Factor in the training pipeline for the pilots who flew them, and the figure climbed considerably higher. Forcing the rescue operation meant accepting real risk of aircraft loss. Was that an acceptable trade for 2 lives? Takamura's expression in the window had gone hard. A soldier who abandons civilians has no right to call themselves a soldier. A click of the tongue, Akatoki. Oh, very noble. You're an idiot, aren't you? Takamura not moving. Akatoki not concealing her contempt. Should I say something? Whose position would I even be arguing from? I became aware that I hadn't reached a conclusion inside myself, and said nothing. Both of them were looking directly at me. The camera geometry of the control unit meant that TSF pilots always appeared face-on. There was nowhere to look away to. Perhaps I'm foolish, Nara said. I'll accept that from you, but call me a fool if you want. I will not be called a coward. You. The tension in the channel spiked. The IF systems meant there would be no friendly fire. That didn't make the cold running down my back feel any less real. Sword Dancer to CP. Is this a formal request from the Japanese government? Mitsurugi reopened the command channel. Shinguchi, who had been silent, answered. It is, however, if the unit on the ground judges the operation unexecutable, we will reassess from our end. If we reach the same conclusion, we will formally inform the Japanese government that the mission cannot be completed. What would refusing the government's request mean for our company's standing? That is not a concern for you to carry. What I need is the ground-level read that we can't get from inside this command post. Whether it's feasible, that's what I'm asking. Shinguchi said nothing further. I wonder what would happen. Contract termination, bankruptcy, unemployment, poverty. That would be bad. I really can't afford to stop eating. Chijira murmured it from the forward seat in the tone of someone reviewing a grocery list. It irritated me more than it should have. So, Chijira-san, what do you want to do? It was an unfair question. Say, leave them and she'd sound like a monster. Say, go and she'd sound like a dreamer. I regretted asking it the moment it was out of my mouth. If I were in charge, I'd go and find out. She answered without hesitation. Akatoki-sen is right that the risk is considerable. We go, and if it's impossible, we turn back. And if we go, there might be a return that justifies the risk. A return that justifies it. Something shifted in my chest. Either way. Chijira continued. The one thing that's certain is that if we don't try, we'll never know. That settled somewhere in me cleanly. She was right. If we don't go, we won't know. That was simply true. In normal circumstances, this is precisely the kind of situation where we would defer to the administrator's judgment. I'm sorry, I'm still not in any shape to. Mitsurugi had turned the question toward me, and I faltered. I know, I was being rhetorical. Mitsurugi smiled, which I realized I hadn't seen her do before. Why not just have Dawn Purple punch them? Might knock the memory back, or kill them, which honestly works too. Snow White playing it as a joke, but the temperature in her eyes wasn't joking. I filed mild wariness of Akatoki Mashiro under confirmed. I wouldn't bother. This isn't a broken television set. It's unlikely a physical shock would restore her memory. Mitsurugi, then, well, it's time to decide. Decision. Mitsurugi would make the call, and she would carry responsibility for whatever followed. My memory still hadn't returned. Making a judgment in this condition was genuinely beyond me. And I caught myself wondering if I was using that as an excuse. I'll share my opinion last. First, I want to hear everyone else's. You're not actually doing this by vote, right? My TSF damage isn't light, and I don't want to go. Akatoki, blunt. My position hasn't changed. We should go. Takamura, unmoved. Mitsurugi gestured to Chijira. We go and see. If it's genuinely impossible, we stop. That's all. That's just lenient. Akatogi muttered. Whatever compatibility existed between Akatoki and Chijira appeared to be essentially none. Rescue, Takamura and Chijira. Leave, Akatoki. If Mitsurugi voted to leave, it would be tied. I tracked the count without meaning to. My view then, if they wish to die where they are, then we should let them die there. And if they want to live, then we should go and get them. Follow what the people being rescued actually want. That was Mitsurugi's position. I found myself thinking about why these four had been put together in the first place, Mitsurugi Takamura Akatoki Chichira. Whoever had arranged it, whatever their reason, I thought I was beginning to understand it. Akatoki Meshiro, the one who kept the ledger of risk and return, who refused to let sentiment override arithmetic. Takamura Yue, the one who measured every decision against what it would mean to be the kind of person she wanted to be, and held that line even when it cost her. Arasai Yoi, the one who always started with what is actually happening right now, and reasoned from there. Mitsurugi Meiya, the one who asked what the other person wanted before deciding what to do about them. There were no clear answers in this world. Every situation existed in the gray, not white, not black. And there was no single sword that could cut cleanly through gray. So you built a unit out of people who disagreed. Wherever I fit into that picture, I still couldn't tell. But the structure made sense to me now in a way it hadn't before. A chime. Jinguji's window, which had been quiet through all of it, showed the mic indicator lit. The individuals are requesting rescue. They're asking us to save the child, at minimum. I see, Mitsurugi said quietly. Then I vote in favor of the operation. So we're indulging two scared kids. We were calling out to them this whole time and they never responded. They were right there when we were nearby and they hid. And now they're panicking and asking for help. How much are we supposed to accommodate these people? Akatoki, immediate. Don't assume. It's possible our calls never reach them. That's 3-1. The rescue operation proceeds. Damn it! The sound of a fist hitting a console. Akatoki making her feelings known inside her control unit. That said, we are mercenaries. Within the bounds of our contract, withdrawal from an operation is permitted. What will you do, Snow White? All permitted. I hadn't known that was on the table. The Immortals might be more reasonable employers than I'd assumed. Excuse me, withdrawal is permitted. You mean the thing where you pay a penalty fee so large you'd never finish paying it in one lifetime? That's a symbolic clause, not a real one. Insubordination acknowledged, but at significant financial cost. Ah. The Immortals were, I revised, a very effective kind of terrible employer. So you have no intention of paying the fee? Who's paying anything? I'm broke, damn it all. Akatoki made no attempt to conceal how thoroughly she despised this situation. Given the terms, one had to wonder why she'd signed the contract in the first place. Another question for after the operation. The list was growing. Then I'll count on your company, everyone. We are resuming the civilian rescue operation. Sword Dancer gave the order. Acknowledgements followed, one by one. 08. The Real World. Convictions. Shirasawa Naoto, would we make it in time? I pulled up the tactical map from the rear seat of the control unit. The panel was scattered with red markers, beta in every direction. 20 kilometers to Machida. En route, Alpha Unit had encountered 2 beta groups and forced their way through both. Routing around them had been discussed and rejected. The risk of being trailed and caught mid-rescue outweighed the time cost of direct engagement. But the fighting had consumed time regardless. And the operation was now running more than 30 minutes behind the original estimate. We're approaching the designated address. Meiji's window. What came into view was a field of ruins. Asahicho was a residential district about 2 kilometers from Machida Station. Had been, anyway. Almost every structure was down. Nothing that could serve as a landmark remained standing. Fires burned in scattered pockets, sending columns of black smoke into the sky. The unit cut their jet-assisted ground slide and landed. The coordinates matched, an electronic confirmation tone. I scanned the area for a broken radio tower. Takamura had mentioned that amateur radio operators sometimes built personal antenna towers on their property. Nothing visible. We're supposed to find 2 kids somewhere in all of this? We wouldn't find them in a week. We can try the external speakers. If they hear us calling, there's a chance they'll come out. Takamura, absorbing Akitoki's sharpness and redirecting. Are you serious? They'll come out when they hear TSF engine noise? If they're still alive, that is. Akitoki's face in the window said everything her words didn't. How much longer are we burning time here? Snow White really is an angry one. Maybe she's hungry. Chijira had switched her mic off and was speaking only to me. Probably we should have given her the yokin. Chijira laughed quietly at that. I half meant it. Akitoki's TSF had taken serious damage over the course of the operation. Her right manipulator arm was already non-functional, and she was down to a single assault cannon. Whether she could meaningfully be counted as combat effective at this point was a genuine question. Her manner was harsh, but Akitoki Mashiro had been carrying out her role without deviation. That was worth something. I let the subject drop. We could dig if we could at least narrow down the area. Chijira thinking out loud. The idea of excavating through this rubble searching for 2 children sat heavily. Wait, I'm getting something on sensors. Takamura. Her TSF had dropped into a landing crouch, a ground-penetrating sonar probe pushed into the earth beneath her. All units, silent mode, no noise, no vibration. Mitsurugi's order. Every machine went still. Acoustic sensing, vibration detection, thermal. Every available function brought to bear on the search. Too faint. Static was leaking through Chijira's headset. She had pushed the external microphones to full sensitivity. The fires in the structural collapse were raising the difficulty of detection with every passing minute. At this rate, we might not be able to find them at all. White Fang to Sword Dancer, requesting dismount clearance. I'll search on foot. Dismount clearance. My heart lurched. Are you out of your mind? Akitoki's profanity hit before I could process the request properly. Do you understand there are beta clusters deployed all around us? If you miss even one small type, you're dead. She wasn't wrong. At least 4 clusters were within a 5-kilometer radius. The nearest was 3 kilometers out, well within a clean line of sight. We had no intention of drawing attention with unnecessary fire. But there was a real possibility the groups had already detected our presence. No small-type contact at present. If a cluster approaches, I'll return to the machine. Takamura answered while already preparing a sidearm. Her intention to dismount was not negotiable. Administrator, your call. Mitsurugi, addressing me without warning. My mind went blank. Why me? I have no memory. I have no basis for judgment. Why are you asking me? For the record, I'm in favor, but I want your read. My heartbeat was loud enough to be distracting, and I could feel Chijira in the forward seat, watching me. I don't have my memory, so I'm not really in a position to. Mitsurugi's eyes in the window stopped that sentence where it stood. The pressure of that gaze. Don't hide behind the excuse. Don't look for a way around it. Mitsurugi Maya looked for the core of a person and didn't let go until she found it. I understand your situation, but White Fang and I received the same education, which means the 2 of us rarely arrive at different conclusions. If that's the case, then. If two people with that kind of settled certainty had reached the same answer, it felt like that should be enough to call it right. The education we received was unusual, what some would call extreme, because of that. While we operate in this world, I want to hear what this world thinks. You've seen it yourself. Snow White and the two of us rarely agree. Unusual education. Something about that I could almost grasp. Mitsurugi and Takamura, their resolve was set too deeply for people their age. The sense that they had been raised to live by their convictions, that it had gone all the way to the bone. I had felt that quality in both of them from the beginning, without being able to name it. So you want a perspective from outside that? Without my memories, precisely because I had no prior framework. The way I processed this situation might be worth something to her. I thought I understood what Mitsurugi was actually asking. What would I decide? What would I have decided before? I could feel Chijira's attention, not just Chijira, all of them. Alpha Unit, watching to see what the administrator looked like when everything extraneous had been stripped away. Think. A spike of pain at my temple. Don't lean too hard on instinct. Don't lean too hard on knowledge. Sort through what you actually have in front of you. Now, weigh the risks against the returns. And then, what do you want? Decide from that, from whatever you actually believe. Mitsurugi, her expression like someone coming at you with a live blade. Takamura, continuing her survival gear check without stopping. And Chijira, a trace of something almost like amusement around the edges. That last one annoyed me. I authorize it. 5 minutes. That's the limit. I don't think it took 10 seconds. Sword Dancer, dismount is authorized. Snow White, dawn purple. Perimeter watch. Focus especially on small type contact. Takamura descended from her machine smoothly and moved into the rubble with her sidearm raised. Broken concrete, snapped support columns, collapsed ceilings. The probability of someone being trapped beneath any of it was real. The possibility that the survivors couldn't call out was equally real. In any normal search operation, you would want more people on the ground. This wasn't a normal situation. Takamura's TSF was switched to autonomous mode and placed under Mitsurugi's control, autopilot effectively. It couldn't execute complex maneuvers, but if Takamura couldn't return to it, the machine could at least continue to function as a minimum combat asset. Like they're going to be found. Akatoki, to herself, had apparently already formed a hypothesis. She was making her way toward one specific collapse structure, moving with purpose. From the elevation of the control unit, looking down, Takamura passed a grappler-class carcass, her figure upright and composed. She looked the part of a warrior. And simultaneously she looked exactly like what she was. A human body in a world scaled entirely too large for human bodies. White Fang is brave. And Chijira, also to herself. I agreed without saying so. Takamura, you. Something clarified in her, like water that had been allowed to settle. She was probably younger than me, and I found I genuinely admired her. Not the skill, though the skill was there, the person. White Fang, tell me if there's anything that needs to be moved. The moment Mitsurugi finished speaking, warning tones broke across every channel. Beta contact alert. Beta group incoming. Contact types, destroyer class. Chijira's voice, sharp and immediate. Tension through my whole body. the worst case. The image formed without being asked for. Destroyer class, built to shatter through obstacles at speed, top velocity 170 kilometers per hour. Nothing in their path tended to stay standing. Operation suspended. White Fang, get back to your machine. I'm moving to intercept. Snow White, Dawn Purple. Support positions. Mitsurugi released the Takamikazuchi from her control authority and moved out solo to meet the contact. Didn't I say this would happen? Akatoki. She had been right. Akatoki's read on this had been correct. My judgment had been wrong. There wasn't time to sit with that. Chijiro was already working the controls. The tactical window updated. The red markers resolved into a count. The force differential is way past manageable. You might want to think about running, Sword Dancer. Akatoki's voice, half challenge, half honest warning. Mitsurugi said nothing in response. The Shiranui's blade came out. Beta fluid already on the steel. Hold this. That was what the Shiranui's back said as it moved toward the oncoming red. Mitsurugi's silhouette against the ruin and the smoke, moving forward. 09, the real world, sustained by a nightmare. Takamura Yui. She left the fighting to her teammates and dropped from the machine in a single motion. She moved to the building she had identified, sidearm raised, taking stock of the surroundings as she went. A ceiling that had fallen at an angle had driven itself into the churned earth, completely collapsed, but no open gaps. The structure hadn't caved all the way through. What had drawn her attention to this building was the fallen antenna tower she had spotted nearby. Takamura Yui crouched and pushed under the angled ceiling into the darkness beneath. The light mounted to her sidearm reached ahead of her into the black. The grip of the pistol, the darkness. Both of them pulled at something. Kyoto Station, the imperial capital. The night she had walked alone through corridors where Beta might have been waiting. The friends she had lost that night. She had never fully processed how they died. The memory refused to settle into something she could close. How many times had she woken to the sound of her name being screamed? She shook her head once, deliberately, and redirected her thoughts. Don't be owned by the past. That night cannot be allowed to repeat. She exhaled slowly and moved the light deeper. There was space here, enough to live in, if living meant keeping off the rain. The ceiling, angled as it was, at least provided that. The light caught something, a dense green surface, not a wall, fabric. She understood immediately, a tent. Someone had pitched a tent under a collapsed ceiling and been living here. A reckless way to survive, but there was no doubt. The people she was looking for had made this place their shelter. Something lifted in her chest. Is anyone here? I've come to help. Answer me. Silence. She waited. Nothing. If you can't call out, make any sound you can. Silence again. In this, she decided to press further inside. Like they're going to be found. Akatoki's voice on the radio. Takamura suppressed a thin edge of irritation. Dust moved through the beam of her light. The structure might shift. She registered automatically. White Fang, tell me if there's anything that needs to be moved. Mitsurugi, keeping watch on her. She noticed, and in noticing thought again, how closely Mitsurugi resembled the person she served. There had been a rumor, groundless, so she had assumed, that Kubui Yuhidenka used a body double. Not an unusual arrangement for someone in that position, and not something she had ever given credit. But standing before Mitsurugi Maya, she had understood it differently. The real thing is recognizable. Whatever Mitsurugi says, whatever she denies, she is connected to that house. I'm certain of it now. Whatever the circumstances that had brought Mitsurugi here, a house with the shogunate's reach would be entirely capable of such arrangements for security purposes. The thought was still forming when the alert broke across every channel. Beta group incoming. Contact types. Destroyer class? Chihira's voice. The tactical map projected across her vision. The markers were not far. Not far. Close. Operation suspended. White Fang, get back to your machine. I'm moving to intercept. Snow White, Dawn Purple. Support positions. A sharp surge of urgency, the catastrophe of that night flashing back behind her eyes. Didn't I say this would happen? The order to return had been given. She should go back to her machine. The Takamikazuchi was in autonomous mode, programmed to adopt a boarding posture when she approached. She knew that. But the survivors were here. They had to be here. She hesitated and lifted the corner of the tent flap. Hand, goods, plastic water bottles, 2 sleeping bags. Small lives had existed here. There was no longer any doubt. Where were they? She swept the light urgently through the dark. Why aren't they here? Did they move? The pitch of the jump units rose outside. Loud enough now that even if the survivors called out, she wouldn't hear them over it. Cannon fire, the air concussed, and dust rained from the collapsed ceiling above her. Faster. Oh. She turned the light toward the back of the structure. Layered concrete fragments, broken furniture, no sign of anyone. There was no time. She made a decision. She aimed at the gap beneath a broken beam and fired. The interior of the house filled with the sound. If there's no response to that, I have to accept they're gone. The echo faded. A tremor through the grounds. The fighting outside was expanding. Is it over? She was already beginning to accept it when something small fell in the corner of the room. She turned. From between fragments of rubble, a small white hand. Found them! She moved, a void formed by fallen concrete, just large enough. And inside it, 2 children, holding each other. A weak cough. They were alive. 2 survivors visually confirmed. Concrete fragments have created a small cavity. They appear to be injured. The beginning extraction now. I can save them. That night will not repeat. It will not repeat. I have grown since then. I have to have grown. I will get them out. Shirasawa Naoto, the tactical map projected across my retinas. Red markers too many to count. By now there was no possibility of misreading what they represented. 2 minutes since Takamura entered the building. No report. The clusters have merged. Sword Dancer can't hold them alone. Chihira's voice was still controlled, but not for much longer. The red markers on the tactical map kept accumulating. White Fang, tell me if you need TSF support to clear the rubble. Can you hear me, White Fang? I repeated it several times. No response. Since the report of the survivors found, contact with Takamura had gone completely silent. What was happening? Her marker hadn't moved. Takamura was meticulous. The idea that she would simply stop reporting wasn't something I could accept easily. Secondary collapse. Chihira's prediction didn't feel wrong. 300 meters away, Sword Dancer was in close combat. 50 meters to the left, Snow White was laying down fire. And the destroyer-class cluster was still bearing down on all of them. The vibration, all of that, generated. It was entirely possible that had been enough to bring more of the structure down. "I'll handle the south approach. White Fang, get back now." Akatoki's report. Her machine was effectively down to one functional arm. Holding volume at this level was beyond what her current condition should allow. I had expected complaints. There weren't any. I noted it. Akatoki Mashiro stopped complaining when things became genuinely dire. Sword Dancer, Snow White, Dawn Purple, 3 pilots, each holding their position at full capacity. "White Fang, do you read? White Fang, please respond." The only thing I could do right now was keep calling. It was inadequate, and I knew it. I called anyway, as loudly as I could. Then a voice louder than mine. "We have a problem, Administrator. Soldier class, small type contact in the vicinity." Chijira's shout triggered something in my memory. Soldier class, common designation, Venator. Slightly over 2 meters in height, several times human physical strength, mandibles capable of shattering bone without effort. Among all beta, the small type class considered to have the highest capability for detecting human targets. And they were nearby. Takamura had gone in with a single sidearm. Cold ran the length of my spine. Why has contact with Takamura gone silent? What is the worst answer? What do I do? Dismount and search? No, that wasn't right. I could feel that much. Small type confirmed. White Fang, stay alert. Cameo and external speakers, simultaneously, both. Answer me. The wish was completely sincere. Takamura was an exceptional soldier. She couldn't be dead. But there was a limit to how long waiting was a valid response. A radio connection tone, white noise, and surrounded. A whisper, Takamura. Surrounded by what? Nothing other than soldier class. My heart went cold. Takamura's marker hadn't moved from inside the collapsed structure. She had found the survivors. She had been in the process of extracting them when the small types had closed in around her. Suppress the small types with the assault cannon. No, that would bring more of the building down. Takamura and the survivors would be buried. Use the TSF's manipulator to strip away the collapsed ceiling. The stress distribution in the rubble was unreadable. One wrong support removed, and the cascade that followed could be catastrophic. "What are you doing? Get White Fang out now!" Akatoki. Please help. I'm going to pull the ceiling away with this machine. When you see small types, take them out. It was forced. It was the only option I could see. I might kill the survivors myself. I might kill Takamura myself. But I couldn't choose to do nothing. "Are you out of your mind? We're holding a defensive formation right now. If the formation breaks, we all go down." Akauti wasn't lying. The hostile markers on the tactical map were still climbing. What do I do? Why am I so far short of what this moment needs? My teeth came together hard. Through the radio, gunfire. "Stay back, you monsters!" White Fang, Takamura Yui's voice. My thinking stopped entirely. The pistol kept firing. Then the radio made a terrible sound and cut out. "I'm pulling the ceiling!" Chijira, her voice stripped to its bones. The assault cannon fire stopped. The cannon was racked onto the back-mounted hardpoint. The manipulator arms came free. She drove them under the base of the collapsed structure and heaved upward in a single motion. I remember once turning over a stone in a garden and finding insects clustered underneath. The memory surfaced for no reason I could name. And then, milky white filled the view, the color of concrete almost exactly. Soldier class, scattered across the space in clusters. And at the center of them, something vivid, red, small fragments of amber gold. Destroyed powered armor. There was no possibility of mistaking it. Those were pieces of Takamura's suit. Oh, 10. The real world immortal. Ashawa na auto, continued. Ah, no. The sound came out of me before I had any word for what I was seeing. What had been Takamura-san occupied considerably less space than it should have. It wasn't that the hair and flesh and blood and powered armor had scattered. It was where they had gone. The soldier class. Their abdomens. Nausea. Cold sweat. I forced the bile back down by sheer effort of will, feeling it all the way to my throat. This is my fault. My decision made this happen. My judgment failed, and this is the consequence. I had no business making calls without my memory, and I made one anyway, and this is what it produced. If I had dismounted alongside Takamura, if I had gone with her, she might still be alive. Why didn't I think of that? Why didn't that occur to me? The soldier class at the Shiranui's feet disappeared, Chijira sweeping them away with the long blade. One after another they were flung clear. All 4 that had been under the strip ceiling were gone. But Takamura-san was not coming back. Someone I had wanted to know better. Someone I had respected without having the history to fully explain why. Someone I would have liked to talk to more, and now, because of my failure, I never would. Not yet, Administrator. We haven't found the civilians. Numerous civilians. 2 children. The ones Takamura Yui had been searching for. White Fang said she found them, which means they're there. They have to be, because otherwise she didn't need to die. My head was burning. Yes, find them. That's what has to happen now. She had drawn the soldier class attention. She had bought time with her life. And that time had to mean something. Please clear the area. I'm dismounting. My hand found the sidearm. My body remembered where it was before my mind did. What the hell are you saying, you idiot? Akatoki, immediately. There's no point going down there. They're all dead. I need to recover White Fang. She's already dead. What's the point of collecting a corpse? I know that, but Takamura-san found those children, and I need to bring back something of hers for her family. Collecting everything wouldn't be possible, but a single lock of hair, a piece of the armor, something that could be given to whoever was waiting for her, because otherwise, it's too cruel. Just die already. Go on, Dee, then. I was already finishing the dismount preparation while she was still shouting. Chijira-san, lower me down. If the control unit opened, the boarding wire would be accessible. That much I remembered. Chijira turned in the forward seat and looked at me. I held the look. I wasn't going to look away, because I meant it, and she needed to know that. A small electronic tone, a communication window opened. Mitsurugi, Chijira must have called her. What do we do, sword dancer? I don't have the confidence to talk this one out of it. Explaining everything from the beginning would take 2 hours. Silence and exhale. Lower them. Time limit on the surface search, 5 minutes. Sword dancer's authorization came at the same moment the control unit opened. I grabbed the boarding wire and dropped the 10 meters to the ground. I landed, raised the sidearm, and started moving. Search. She said she found them. She said it. They are here. Don't doubt that. Concrete fragments, snapped columns, split flooring. I moved low, scanning every gap and recess. They would be sheltering somewhere in one of the spaces left between the fallen pieces. Come out! Hurry! It's safe right now! No response. I turned in every direction. On the rubble, streaks of red. She'd fought here. There was no question. A crunch underfoot. I registered what I had stepped on before I could stop myself. Flesh, bone fragments, shattered pieces of powered armor. A lock of hair, matted with mud and blood, and the decorative cord still tied to it. I reached down for a fragment of amber gold armor on the ground, and my eyes moved past it. Behind a concrete slab, a child. Found them, Chijira-san. I pointed to the rubble pile 3 meters ahead. The Shiranui's manipulator arm swung in and lifted a large slab clear. 2 children, holding each other. Neither appeared conscious. I'm coming! I ran toward them. The next moment, something hit me with complete, absolute force. Searing pain, a high keening in both ears. The sounds of the world receded, thinned, went far away and dark. The impact had torn the sidearm from my hand. Through a vision blurred with tears, I could see something milky white moving. I was struck. That was what I understood. With impact-rated powered armor, it had felt like this. Without it, I would have been dead in that instant. My whole body had gone numb. Administrator, find the sidearm. Someone was calling my name. I thought I heard it. Ah. The world was separating from me, moving away, receding, growing very distant. I thought, that's such a shame. July 11th, 2023. I was severed from the world. 011. The real world. Resurrection. The sensation of liquid moving, like a washing machine running somewhere distant, or a large drum marking out a steady rhythm. Strange. Familiar somehow, in a way that made no sense. What the blurred edges of my hearing picked up, my brain didn't bother to interpret. The sounds simply passed through, unprocessed, and were gone. Surgery was successful. Vitals are stable. We're past the worst of it. Brain damage from the blood loss. Can't say for certain until consciousness returns, but I'll call it acceptable for now. Though this one is a special case. Silence. If recovery stalls, we discard. Sinking, the world growing distant again. I was reaching for something. What it was, I couldn't tell. Darkness, intermittent detonations, small tremors, and the shudder of air. Someone screaming, a feeling like failure pressing in from all sides. You failed. Everything goes wrong because you are worthless. The words wound around me like something living. Become smaller, disappear. The curses came, and I accepted them without resistance, the way you accept something obvious. Life is subject to attrition, something that has failed being erased. That was simply the natural order. I understood that. But someone's presence would not allow it. Something refused to let me go. Consciousness surfaced from the dark. The world was full of light. Gradually, a center formed in my awareness. What had been vague became real. White LED light inset into a ceiling. This isn't my room. Where is this? My throat was completely dry. The words came out with difficulty, scraped against something raw. "Oh, awake are you, Administrator?" Someone was looking down at me, a distinctive hair color. A bottle was extended toward me. I took the straw between my lips. When I swallowed, I could feel the water absorbing into tissue that had gone completely without it. Chijira-san. The very same. Casual clothing, the kind you'd wear for a morning run. The fighting is over. I registered from that alone. I had survived. The image of a soldier class surfaced at the edge of my half-focused vision. Where exactly is this? On a bed. I knew that. I wanted to know the location. Medical bay? Yes, the medical bay. My thoughts reconnected. I had dismounted. I had found the children. And then a soldier class had struck me, and I had lost consciousness. I should thank Chijira for pulling me out. I tried to push myself upright. Pain hit immediately and completely. Something that was almost a scream escaped as a sharp exhale. Not yet. Moving hurts. We amputated both legs after all. Both legs amputated. I threw the blanket back. There were legs there. I have legs? White, clean hospital clothing. Below the hem I could see feet, ankles. You do have legs. A terrible joke in every possible sense. Though my thighs ached, as if they had genuinely been severed and reattached. With Chijira's help, I managed to get myself sitting upright, but the pain didn't recede. It hurts, doesn't it? I think the nerves haven't settled yet. Nerves haven't settled. What did that mean? Chijira had turned away and was searching for the bedside intercom. It's Chijira. The administrator has regained consciousness. I wondered who she was calling. The thought didn't go further than that. My mind felt like it had gauze packed around it. A few minutes later, a physician arrived, examined me, and reported no immediate concerns, though they wanted to keep me under observation for several more days. You appear to have had a number of complications. The doctor offered that as a parting observation before leaving. By the way, Administrator, are you hungry? I wasn't. My thirst had eased. I said so. Good. I'm relieved. I apologize, and I hope you'll forgive me. I ate most of the get-well gifts. Of course you did. The large basket that had presumably held an assorted selection of fruit now contained a small number of apples and else. Administrator, I have gained the knowledge that a Simbakia set is the optimal hospital gift. That was delicious. I'm glad. There wasn't much else to say, though I did find myself wondering who had brought gifts in the first place. The door slid open. A face I recognized entered. The person who had been giving me orders. That was when I noticed I was in a private room. So you're back with us, Administrator? Yes, What was I supposed to call her? Right, I've lost my memory. It came back to me. I'm not disoriented. I couldn't produce the name of the woman in front of me. Honestly, forgetting your superior officer, Jinguji Marimo, I oversee the TSF unit. Jinguji Marimo. The fact of her being my superior registered without resistance. She gave the impression of someone senior in every sense. The leg hurt? Yes. Was she going to make the same kind of terrible joke Chijira had? I couldn't be sure. While you were unconscious, the tissue that had been bitten through was removed and prosthetic bioreplacements were implanted. The nerves will ache until they adjust, but you should regain full mobility in time. Prosthetic bioreplacements. I didn't know what that meant. The uncertainty sat uneasily. I'll admit you surprised me, disposing of a soldier class while both legs were being eaten. We reviewed the footage. Not something I'd want to watch twice. Both legs being eaten. By what? By me. In the corner of my vision, Chijiro was peeling an apple with quiet concentration, the red skin separating from white flesh. Red blood against milky white. The nausea came back without warning. My body responded before my mind could stop it. Are you all right? Shinguji's hand moved to my back. My heart rate accelerated. You needn't worry. The parent organization of this company is considered the foremost name in regenerative medicine. You will regain full function. There is no question of that. Regenerative medicine. Which meant Chijiro's remark had been literally true, in its own way. The relevant memories appear to be gone as well. Shinguji's murmur. I could recall dismounting from the TSF. But after that, how had I come back alive? The center of my head felt heavy in a way that thinking couldn't move through. You were unconscious for approximately 2 months. The blood loss was severe and placed considerable strain on the brain. Recovery will require monitored progression before we can return you to active duty. Both legs. I absorbed that. It seemed to be the truth. For what it's worth, I visited every day. And since letting things spoil would have been wasteful, I accepted all the gifts on your behalf. A rabbit-shaped apple slice was extended toward me. No toothpick available, so I picked it up with my fingers and put it in my mouth. Sweet. And at that sensation, I realized my stomach was completely empty. Thank you. The simple sweetness of it settled something. I had come very close to dying. I had come back from it. I also assisted with the catheter insertion. I do hold a nursing license. Chijiro was beaming. She seemed genuinely pleased about this. That was fine. Catheter. I searched my memory for what that meant, and found it. A tube inserted into the urethra to manage the elimination needs of an unconscious patient. A very unpleasant premonition. I had been unconscious for 2 months. Biological functions would have continued regardless. Ah, yes, that was rather challenging. Though I've got the technique down now, you can count on me again next time. Rather challenging. Rather challenging, challenging. The words repeated themselves in my mind. This was information I had not wanted to possess. Even setting aside the medical licensing. The fact that a young woman had handled that particular aspect of my care, combined with the fact that she seemed to feel absolutely nothing unusual about it, was somehow the detail that landed hardest. Recovery tends to be rapid once consciousness returns. For now, focus on healing properly. Shinguji's words of encouragement passed through me without quite landing. Yes, I answered on reflex. Actually thinking about anything was still beyond me. We lost a great deal in the fighting that day. You are needed back in the field as quickly as possible. Something snapped into focus. The amber gold TSF, black hair, blood and flesh, and bones scattered across the ground. Pieces of armor. Takamura Yui was dead. If anything comes up, contact me directly. That was what she had said. She had been kind. She had been composed in the truest sense of the word. She had been someone worth admiring. She had not been someone who should have been allowed to die. and it had happened as a direct result of my failure, and I had not yet done anything to account for that. I truly needed, after my misjudgment cost a teammate her life? My memory still hadn't returned. An incompetent making bad calls had gotten a capable person killed. Silence. Nothing but the faint background noise of the climate control. You have the ability. We believe that. Jinguji said it the way a mother might, or an older sister. Or a teacher speaking to a student they were not willing to give up on. But I couldn't answer. I am grateful for your confidence. I will redirect my feelings and commit myself to my duties. Saying something like that was completely beyond me. It would have been obscene. There is no margin right now to leave capable people unused. Arn, she continued. Japan has lost Tokyo. The Beta have divided the country from east to west. The Kanto region has fallen completely. The line now stands at the Shirakawa barrier in the east and Sekigahara in the west. The country split in two. In the corner of the room, the quiet sound of Chijira eating apple. If no one fights, humanity will simply be overrun. So fight. The words she didn't say pressed down on me with everything the ones she did say couldn't carry. But I had no answer. Did someone who had gotten Takamura-san killed have the right to answer? Do you want to stop making mistakes? Do you believe you caused someone's death? I nodded. Tears fell without my permission. My own inadequacy was crushing me from the inside. I didn't have Mitsurugi's capacity. I couldn't calculate the way Akatu could. I couldn't trust the current moment, the way Chijira did. But Takamura's way of living, her ideals, those were something I had been able to feel. Something I had thought I might be able to reach, somewhere I had hoped to grow toward. The way she moved through the world had struck me as beautiful, and I had wanted, in some private part of myself, to be able to imitate it. And yet, my nails were pressing into my palm. My fist was shaking. If I could have crushed myself with it, I would have. A hand came to rest gently over that fist. Good. I looked up. Jinguji was looking at me. Turn that anger at yourself into something useful. Do that, and you will become stronger. The dead do not blame the living. They don't curse. They don't come back to haunt, which means there is no relief to be found in being condemned by the dead. The dead don't curse the living. What changes the present is the living, not the dead. And whatever else was true, Takamura Yui was not the kind of person who would curse anyone. I had almost nothing to go on. Only the small fragment of her I had known, but that was enough to know that with certainty. Your anger belongs to you. Only you can do anything with it. Hold on to just that, for now. I nodded. Breath escaped me. Jinguji's hand tapped my shoulder, once, twice. A sound broke loose from somewhere in my chest. I will not forget the way Takamura Yui lived. I made that decision in the moment, and I knew I meant it. Ah, one thing I forgot to mention. The children you were searching for were recovered. My breath stopped. Your decision was not wrong, and Takamura's sacrifice was not wasted. Something moved through me, released or perhaps dissolved. But I knew, immediately and without doubt, that I could not let this feel like absolution. This was not my achievement. It was what Takamura-san had left behind, what she had made possible at the cost of everything. Rest tonight. I'll check in again tomorrow. Thank you. Small, barely a whisper, but I managed to give her that. Jinguji left. Chijira turned back toward me and held out another apple slice. I took it, the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, perhaps fitting for someone with no memory to eat from. For what it's worth, I was the one who recovered you and the civilians. The control unit was running at 200% capacity. I'm sorry, thank you. Don't worry about it. It was a little bit interesting, actually. What a strange person. I thought I had no idea how to respond to that, though in a completely different way from not knowing how to respond to Jinguji. Well then, see you tomorrow. Oh, and the hospital food here is actually decent. Look forward to breakfast. She hummed something under her breath as she stood. On her way out, she turned off the lights. Alone in the dark room. Just tonight, I'll let myself cry until it's done. Wash whatever is pathetic about me out and let it go. From tomorrow, I start again. Whatever comes, whatever the situation demands, I start again as someone new. That was the decision I made. The night settled quietly around me. Before the sun rises, I need to become someone who can fight again. Because I was going to have to leave this clean-sheeted, warm-blanketed sanctuary of a room and walk back out into it.